Welcome to the Martian Revelation tonight. It's me, Green, here. I help out with the Martian Revelation show, and Gary will not be live tonight. He is having microphone issues with his computer, and he is trying to get that problem resolved right now. However, we feel it is a great opportunity to look into the past for a discussion and an investigation that still needs to be discussed and investigated. This is in regards to UFO diaries and the Faces of Mars images that to this day has still never taken roots with anomaly hunters and taken seriously the importance of needing to get these questions answered about. Gary has, over the years, provided collages of truths and informations that only can be presented in the way which we will see as cheesy YouTube videos, you could say, where in unofficial ways the truth can be told and has been brought forth regards to this serious issue. One must watch and listen carefully. As Gary always says, pack 'em and smoke 'em, and you're definitely gonna need 'em. So let us reflect down through time into the archives of the Martian madness, and hopefully now people will open their eyes and see the light, and will hopefully call out Richard Hoagland about the Faces of Mars and the UFO diaries, and keep the fact that Hoagland provided these images to the producer of the UFO diaries, and Hoagland wants to keep this swept under the rug.
The following program is intended for mature audiences.
People of Earth, attention. People of Earth, attention. This is a voice speaking to you from thousands of miles beyond your planet.
And you're listening to the Martian Revelation. Strap in tight.
Get your ass to Mars.
Go to www.thefacesofmars.com. That's www.thefacesofmars.com. And I'm hoping to have this out on the record. Bottom line, Dr. Hoagland had a mixed message around their mission. EnterpriseMission.com.
Yep.
They had a secret agenda.
Down through time.
Yep.
I've spent the last 35 years pressing NASA and this government to release the data they've accumulated about an ancient civilization on Mars. I have looked high and low for images, for evidence, for documentation. I have spent countless hours, countless amounts of money, countless hours in airplanes, countless time talking to people, listening to total wackos on the possibility they might have a germ of data, cross-correlating. If I was able to prove that NASA had a set of images of the structures at Cydonia that have never been made public, and I had access to them, wouldn't it be kind of logical that I could make a fortune if I brought those out and revealed them? What possible logical reason would I have to suppress that smoking gun evidence?
Hopefully that some one of us or ones of us will see.
So from the get-go, when we get into the honesty of
Richard Hoagland
with the Faces on Mars,
Cover-up controversy.
with the American people,
Down through time.
we find a doublespeak.
Richard Hoagland.
I'm NASA and you're not?
Why is he always talking in some kind of gay code?
We find a lack of straight talk,
Richard Hoagland.
because Project
UFO Diaries
was not civilian. It was a military program carried out by a branch of the U.S. Department of Defense, i.e.
American authorities are sabotaging efforts to discover the truth. Richard Hoagland
of this amazing
UFO Diaries.
He says to stop further investigation into mysterious pictures. Mr. Hoagland says they are evidence of intelligent life.
And we're now just rediscovering our heritage.
NASA has had a long, very close relationship with the Department of Defense.
I'm NASA and you're not?
So they have been, I believe, under a lot of national security restrictions, and there is very much evidence, I believe, of backtracking and coyness on behalf of NASA and their involvement with UFOs.
UFO diaries.
The NASA individuals here that may know about it, of course, would never make a comment on it.
Well, I'm suspicious.
I am probably one of the more fortunate people on the
UFO diaries.
in that I actually was able to see over a half a dozen
Mysterious pictures.
of these monsters.
The faces on Mars.
Mysterious pictures.
Actually to see them live. An awesome, amazing, awesome experience.
In a Masonic lodge.
Which someday I probably should put in the book.
You know, a lot of people will think that your conspiracy theories make you stark raving mad.
And I realized at that point that this is a no-win scenario. This is the Kobayashi Maru. You'll never, it's like the tar baby. You'll never get out of being dependent on official agencies. I'm NASA and you're not, to tell you the truth.
No, they won't tell you.
Like they're expecting Big Daddy
Dick
Hoagland to sit down in front of a TV camera and tell
The other side of midnight.
them the facts of life. I hate to say it, but
The other side of midnight.
the community is stuck. They're stuck on a model where Big Daddy
Dick
Hoagland tells you the truth. Oh, you can't believe it.
Mad Martian. Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
Until Big Daddy
Dick
Hoagland tells you the truth.
Unbelievable.
Is it possible that maybe we have someone else to thank for having this data?
Some extraordinary code of intelligence down
Through time. I don't have the answer, but I'm going to try to find out because I think it's important.
I think I know who it is. It's someone that really just wants to bug me.
Unbelievable.
Or,
That wouldn't be your stalker, would it?
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
The good news is, by Gary doing what he's doing, he's forcing more people to ask deeper and better questions.
Who is this
Dick
Hoagland
really?
Because what this will allow us to do
down
through time, Gary, is to return the
UFO diaries.
faces on Mars,
Mysterious pictures.
to return the process
some extraordinary code of intelligence down
through time to the people. Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere, unfortunately is not well. He needs help. To return the process
some extraordinary code of intelligence down
through time to the people, allowing you the opportunity to set the record straight. On a solar system scale, if we are correct.
Yep.
Our team's thinking is that face is our face, or what we once were.
The great mystery at this point seems to be if the Enterprise mission and its colleagues can find all this and so much more, then why can't NASA? Or is there something more? Is it possible that they have seen what we have seen and also understand what's really there,
You're despicable.
but have a reason to keep silent?
Oh,
huge conspiracy.
it is a conspiracy.
My feeling is that we have been managed toward this moment
Down through time.
not by people who want to get rid of and want to kill off
Mad Martian.
and all that crap, which is wonderful, exquisite distraction, is it not?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It makes you think of the managers as your enemies as opposed to quietly managing for success.
Time to change has come and gone. Watched your fears become your God. It's your decision. It's your decision. Overwhelmed, you chose to run. Apathetic to the stand. It's your decision. It's your decision. You feed the fire that burned us all when you lied. To feel the pain that spurs you on like inside. No one plans to take the path that brings you lower. Here you stand before us all and say it's over, it's over. It might seem an afterthought. Yes, it hurts to know you're bought. It's your decision. It's your decision. You feed the fire that burned us all when you hide. To feel the pain that spurs you on like inside. It's your decision. It's your decision. No one plans to take the path that brings you lower. And here you stand before us all and say it's over, it's over. It's over.
So that's what we have planned for the upcoming months.
All right, fantastic. And we do have another call that came in here. We've got 719 area code. You are on Late Night in the Midlands. First name and where you're calling from, please.
You know me, man. Hey, Mike. And hey, George. This is Gary, the Mad Marsh and the Marsh Reveal.
Gary.
Hello,
How
Gary.
are you, Gary? Happy New Year, Gary.
How are you, George? You have a good holiday.
Yes, I did. I said Merry Christmas and Happy New Year there, Gary, to you and your family.
Oh, excellent. It's going to be, well, I appreciate that. You know, it's been long and coming and needed to be actually had. And this year and next year, well, I hope to, and pray even to be better, especially from the positions we are all in now in this working time. And I got to say, you know, very interesting, you know, and it's good that, you know, the scientific journals, also at SPSR, connection to them and addressing these issues beyond what we have known, like you mentioned earlier, George, starting out at Enterprise in '98. You remember they were really, really conservative, and and they have been, I think, bolstered along by your close connections and interactions with them, like you said, I think on another show you were on, which we'll get in a second, but that you mentioned something important, that you helped open their eyes. And I found that impressive, beyond Dr. J, I mean. Like Dr. Horace Crater and a few of the others there, and Mr. Williamson and others, and, look where it's at. What do you feel has been the progression of the mainstream science? Because, again, you're mentioning these papers. Remember, this is policy-driven mainstream. And think about this, even to have the position of, never mind Paratopia, but this find for a face. George, a face of Mars is being put in a scientific paper.
Yes. That's great. That's what I mean. This is a very exciting time. It's great that we're on late night in the Midlands here discussing this and getting the word out there. He's getting a lot of calls, a lot of reaction. That's what we're out
no
there
dark missions here.
No. We're trying to get it all out in the open. And, like I said, we're not trying to sell a book with this paper. The paper can be downloaded and read for free. You just have to go to the Journal of Space Exploration. And actually, this current issue that's out, there's, I think, 8 or 9 different papers in this issue. And all of the authors are members of the Society for Planetary Study Research, and they all deal with structures and artificial features on Mars. So this is an all-Mars issue. It's another thing I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so this whole issue is the Mars issue that they've just put out. Dr. Brandenburg is on the board of this journal, so he was very instrumental in putting this all together. We've been working on this.
Is any of his articles pertaining to Cydonia as well as the nuke situation involved in this latest magazine?
Yes, in the journal, he has another paper that he's done with some new data about the apocalypse, the 2 explosions that went on Mars, where he's
right, the nuke situation, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So that paper is in there, but it's different than the one that was published in the other journal. He's added some newer information. I think he was on. Dr. Brandenburg was just on Coast to Coast with George Norrie talking about the new data, which supports his theory that these 2 nukes went off on Mars.
Wow, it's really interesting where they're willing to go now, isn't it? I mean, compared to when we first began. I mean, look how, George, we've come a long way. We've come a long way.
Yeah, the audience should know, Gary and I, we met on Enterprise Mission Discussion Board. We go back, over 20 years I've known Gary. So Gary's one of the original researchers in this field.
That's right.
Indeed, and George has supported my work and many of my finds, and we've collaborated on some finds, and there's many finds I know he's still dying to do more research on that I have found, and even vice versa, believe it or not. So, George, don't sell yourself short. You have some interesting finds I'm very interested in, as too. Now, I want to get back to the journal first before I make my comments so I can get off. There may be another caller, wink, wink, but I want to say this. You know whose article and whose work I'd really love to see in that journal also? Dr. Horace Crater's on the mounds. Because it's a foundation of what she was doing, and I was really looking into, because he's right, but if he expands his search, he sees they're all over the place. And they're not all just craters. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is very pertinent because it falls in line to the when and how and why these structures are sitting as they do, and the placements thereof, and whatever people call them grids, I call them artscapes. George, you and I had many discussions on that, on what I believe I'm seeing there. and how we're getting them from NASA. It has been, going good, but still, I still believe the Mars we now know is covered, and we don't have to get into that. But look where they're willing to go today, even coast to coast, and accept the faces of Mars. Now, this is one aspect. Because, Mike, as you know, the face of the Mars and what has been, obviously, I've been from as the icon for pushing, not by my decision, but by force, it seems. And I have to force my way, pun intended, more ways than one, to try to bring this subject up about the faces of Mars. And lo and behold, you made history. But however, what is the history that's going to be allowed, and how much of it is going to actually be through the research to be allowed to be addressed? You see what I mean in regards to the faces of Mars and or secret images? You had ample opportunity, and I was really praying that you would have brought that up to Mr. Hoagland that time. Instead, he was giving you the reach around. And I know you've seen that, George.
Yeah,
you've seen that, but you told me one step at a time. You told me one step at a time. I know this ain't really your fight, but however, it is. Because you're out there pushing the face of Mars. I know you do, and I'm respectfully, I'm not disrespectfully bringing this up to you. And I don't want the listeners, because George and I go way back, and both as artists, and and what we have seen, like the Pink Panther and many other finds. I mean, it's beyond real. And that's the whole bizarre thing, because look where we're at now compared to where we were at then. All the attacks back then, and look where we're at now. And look where I'm at now because of an investigation in the faces of Mars. Yet all the serious Mars researchers out there are not bringing it up to the ones that needs to come to, especially when they're running their own shows, pretending to be these leaders and beacons of the truth. George, no offense, but you got to understand, and I'm not the only one that notices this, it shows complicitness to the conspiracy and uncare, which some said that I should call you out on, which I know it's not true, because you and I speak also privately time to time, do we not? So it's not like it's on a show or just bypassing. We've known each other for years, and I know I've been out of the way for a while, and you know why. And now I've been out, and look what the situation is, and no one wants to bring it up to me unless you don't get to go on this show, and like you tried to control Mike here. And it's not just one individual, George. It's a whole network. Even Art Bell himself complicit. This is what I mean. What I mean by seriousness. They're like, well, George is disrespecting. I said, no. I think George might be waiting for the right time or moment, or he might not know how, because he doesn't want to seem disrespectful. Because the things that happen to me gives me the nuts to be able to say, heck with all that respect crap, and just get to the truth. But, you got your thing going on in where you are in your work. But one thing is needed to be said, George. The faces of Mars is a reality. If we're finding them on hillsides like that, like what you described there in your artist friend, I like that presentation, by the way. And myself, I find it a little reachy. But after you putting out the recent things on that, I could see more of where you're coming from and why, especially with the new data. Back then, we had one image. You brought that up. Now we have, 5 to 10? After 10 years? So it's getting better. And it's still there. And okay, there's still something there of a reason, a credibility to want to justify. But when we as investigators, George, are confronted with other things that demand investigation because it's our job, you have to ask as well. Regardless what happens, you look the better because you're investigating. You want the answers. And I also pleaded I needed your help years ago. Now, again, I'm not saying this in no disrespect. I just want people to know where the reality is, because this is in the archive and people are listening, as Mike knows well, and you do. And therefore, my voice is on the record now to help paint a clearer picture of what the reality is, the faces of Mars. It's not a joke. It's happening, and it's there, and it's being suppressed by those who want to charge you guys money, make money off all you guys, and offer you reach arounds to stay in their camp of how they want to put their spin on what the history was, is, and will be. This breaks them. This breaks that policy. And, George, it puts you and Mike and others that want the truth in a greater light by not being afraid to open the mouth. And I say this again, out of all respect, George, you and I go way back, and, we went through some whoop-de-doos, but this is a whoop-de-doo that is not just about me. It's about you. It's about Keith Blaney. It's about Mike. It's about the whole audience, because it's something that we all need to know, yet look where it's leading. This whole thing on the surface, like I was trying to say to Mike that night, remember, Mike, about Sideshow? Everything's happening for what? It's bringing us to the realization to focus, all right, what's this all about? Oh, Faces of Mars. Well, where's those images? Okay, but no one's asking. They're looking to you. They're looking to me. They're looking to Morning Stars. They're looking to David Wilcox. They're looking to Project Scamelot. They're looking to Art Bell. And where are they taking it? But yet, you're in the journal. What's wrong with this picture? George, keep rocking. I mean, no disrespect. I love you, buddy. But take in mind where it's going to go this year. And also, the Martian Revelation cometh again. Good night, George. Keep rocking. I love you again. No disrespect, but think about it. Mike, you rock. You kick ass. You're my brother. Good night, my friends.
All right. Good night, Gary.
Good night, Mike.
Thanks.
All right, Gary.
Yeah, thanks for the call. I wanted to give you a chance to answer, George. So, I mean, anything that you want to get out there, Gary, he's some might take him as crazy sometimes, and I say he's crazy about the truth and about getting.
Well, yeah. One thing Gary's crazy about is the truth, and I knew exactly the references that he was making. I don't know if the listening audience was sure about where that was going.
Yeah, I think so, because he's been on the show several times, and so he's had many times. I've covered Gary's findings and stuff for since 2011, I think now.
Yeah, I'd like to propose a show with Gary and I coming on talking about the faces that Gary discovered, because I think that. With me on the show with Gary and presenting it to the audience, kind of the way we did the images of the crown face, I think people would be very, very impressed about what he has found. And what is controversial about what he's found is it's surrounded in controversy, and all the roads lead back to Richard Hoagland and what he was doing with this project. And I think that would make a great show.
I think it would too. I'm all for it, as a matter of fact. So I'll get with Gary and
talk to Gary and see if he'd be interested in doing a show together, talking about that topic. And I'm sure your audience would be very interested in it.
I'm positive that they would. I think that would be great. I'd actually look forward to something like that.
Because there's a lot more to what Gary has found that I have some insight to, that I've discussed with him privately, and I think bringing some of this stuff to light would really be an amazing show.
Gary says he's all for it. He said, let's do it. So
he's already contacted you?
He's in the chat room. He's already...
All right.
So I'll get with Gary and get with you, and maybe put you both in an email with me, and then we could figure out a good date. I mean, I've even got more openings this month later or next month. So it's be up to you guys.
All right. Sounds great.
All right. Well, hey, George, thank you so much for being here tonight. I appreciate it, and keep up the great work, please.
Well, thanks for having me on again, and I'll look forward to listening to the show back to see how everything sounded.
All right, great. Well, thanks again.
All right. Have a good New Year.
You too, my friend. You too. All right. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. So there he goes, George Haas, and I really enjoy talking with George. I enjoy talking with Dr. Brandenburg. These guys, I love talking about Mars, folks. It's so important. I think it has just so much to do with our actual history and such, but I won't get into all that right now. But yeah, that sounds good. We'll set up a show and have the two of them on together. And folks, here again, I mean, this does this not just put a little more credibility into what we've been telling you for a long time? Does it not? I mean, do you still think Gary's just some crazy guy? Really? Listen, I can see if you're somebody who judges a book by their cover or by first impressions are pretty big. They are. And I'm sure first impression, like even people who've listened to this show, they've listened on a night when I was going off. I mean, they just happen to pick a night when I'm fired up, and it might be a turnoff to them. I don't know, but I'll tell you what, Gary is a very serious researcher, and I've said it before. I trust everything that he presents to me when it comes to Mars. I absolutely trust it. Gary is one of us. He is, he's real. He's about the truth. He's not walking around with gold teeth and all that. You know what I mean? So, but hey, I was looking at more of these pictures, and I put the link in the chat room, and I can't wait to get Gary on with George and go over some of this stuff. I mean, I'm looking at some of Gary's photos here, and they're pyramidal formations. I mean, pyramids. And then you got these big, what would look like a crater next to it, but it just looks so perfect. It looks so perfect. There's no doubt. There's structures on Mars. We're looking for signs. We're looking for signs all the time. We've got millions of signs that have been given to us on other planets, on the moon. Okay, how about right here on Earth? What about the crop circles? What about the millions and millions of people who have given testimony? I mean, folks, it's no secret no more. Some of you want to live under a rock. Some of you do. Some of you want to live under a rock, and you want to pretend that it's just Jesus and you and nobody else. And I'm not picking on you. That's, but what I am saying is you got to expand your mind a little bit. I'm telling you, there's more to this life source than just here on Earth. It extends, and I think it goes far beyond Mars probably too as we go on. I mean, I don't know. Even if they find that there was life on Mars, I'm not going to. There's some people say, okay, so it was just Mars and Earth, but it couldn't be anymore. No, it's all over the universe, and we're the only dummies who are still questioning it, and it's pretty sad. Interesting, very interesting. There is another side. There's a lot you don't know, and they're not telling you. And that's what we got Late Night in the Midlands for, to try to get to it. See, we're a little unpopular with the George Norries, the Art Bells, and these, because, honestly, and I'm not just sitting here being gloating or any of that stuff. I'm really not. The truth is that we cannot be bought. We really cannot be bought. They've tried. We've had to. N-Search Radio tried to buy us. Dark Matter tried to shut my mouth. Really, they did. I mean, I see through this stuff. I'm not stupid. I know what they were doing. George Norrie, once I called out Richard Hoagland, he wouldn't have me on his show no more, or he wouldn't have anything to do with me no more. As a matter of fact, I've never been on his show. I don't really care to be. I couldn't handle somebody in my ear telling me, hey, don't talk about that. When we come back from break, don't talk about that. Don't mention Jesus. Don't mention George Bush. I couldn't handle that stuff. So I can't be on shows that want to control everything. Let's not have an interview. Let's have a conversation. Let it flow. And I'm going to have one now. I've got 610 area code. You are on Late Night in the Midlands. First name, where you're calling from, and I'm going to guess here if I remembered good. Is this Tony?
Yes, Michael, it is Tony.
I'll be damned. It is. I remembered.
Yes, it is. And so much that you've been touching on about the last, because I've been a loyal listener for the last, 6 or 7 years, and I remember things when Mad Martian was on, when he had the troubles that he had, and apparently they've been taken care of. And then listening to Gary, the Mad Martian. I remember him, back in the day when he had some serious shit going on, with people talking crap on him, and it seems like he's gotten through that, and which is a good thing. That's a good thing.
Well, and you know what's helped? What helps somebody who's going through stuff like that is when you have people who not only stand by your side, not only tell you they're going to stand by your side, but they give you their word and they stick to it. And he's got that. I've always supported Gary, and I've not always been happy with him. There's times he's come on the show and just I couldn't get a word in edgewise, which is, but you know what? I understand it, and I've never gotten mad at him. I've never told him, you're never coming back on my show, because he's important to the truth. He really is. And you got guys like... He made a point to get his point out there and say what he had to say and what people were saying about him, and he came through it. He came through it well, I think. And it really is a good thing. It really is a good thing that you got going. And I congratulate you for coming as far as you have with your own network and all that. This has been a broadcast of Late Night in the Midlands. Folks, I want to end this evening with something that has been eating inside of me, and something you'll probably say, some of you will say, well, you could have handled it a different way. And however, maybe that's true. Maybe that's true, but I am who I am. So, however, I feel it is important that you, the listener, hear it right from me rather than anybody else or any rumors or anything like that. I want to first comment on Art Bell. And, I've listened to Art Bell since the early 90s. I never missed a show, and anybody who lived with me through those years will tell you I kept them up all hours of the night with my radio, especially the AM radio. Oh, how horrible, right? And, I've always had a great respect for Art Bell. As a matter of fact, the first time I ever heard Art Bell, I was up late, which I've done pretty much my whole life. And I just happened to be I was looking for a football game, actually, on the radio. And that's when I stumbled accidentally across Art Bell and Richard Hoagland, who were doing a show. And this is a long time ago now. We're talking early 90s. And Richard was talking about Mars. And so that's what hooked me. I heard these guys talking, and I couldn't help it. I had to listen every night. And I wasn't into every show every night, but I listened anyways because I had a great respect for the host. I thought he did a great job. Now, I'll say this. I receive death threats on occasion. I do. And I even have nuts who come to find my home and cut my lines. And I've got a wife and kids also. And so I could see the concern. I really do. I feel the concern that somebody can have with these things going on. But here, how I handle it now, so what I do is I just do more shows, longer shows, and speak even louder to send a message that, quite frankly, for me anyways, I'm not going to be intimidated or silenced. Now, that's not to say that that's the decision for everybody else. That's just how I handled it. And so far, knock on wood, I'm still breathing. Nevertheless, I thank Art Bell for opening my mind to all this years ago. Now, that being said, I want to talk about a story from years ago. Now, years ago, I had a man who came to me to tell me that he had worked with somebody well-known, and that this person not only destroyed his radio program, but attempted to destroy his life because, well, this well-known person told this guy to follow the breadcrumbs and seek the truth. Excuse me. Well, this guy did just that, and heaven behold, the truth actually came back to this well-known person, right? Now, try to follow me now. I'm going somewhere with this. So the man who was seeking the truth was hurt and attacked in many ways, including an attempt to actually lock him up. And this guy sent me a ton of evidence in which I spent months putting together and confirming as well. Being the man that I am, I told this truth seeker, despite how crazy he may come off to some, I told him that I would stand by his side no matter what, because I do stand for the truth. And that's really all I've ever wanted, is just the truth. That's it. I don't, I'm not into all the drama and all that crap, but I've always been for the truth. And if somebody can show me truth, I stand for it. I'm always in the corner of truth. Anyways, we'll get back to that later. So let's skip ahead to September 2015, if we may. I received a couple phone calls, a couple incredible phone calls at that. At the time, they were pretty incredible. I received calls on my wife's cell phone, my studio line, my home phone. Man, they was ringing me off the hook, okay? So anyways, I finally answer it. Curiosity flowing, excitement, sure. I mean, I was about to have a private conversation with the man, so I really was excited. I mean, after all, I am human, right? So I speak with these two gentlemen at separate times, on the phone at separate times, and what they were proposing is that, well, they told me that I had a great show and that it would fit in really, really good in a 3-hour time slot. And this was Art and Keith who I spoke to, and they wanted to put my show in front of Art. So it would have been Late Night in the Midlands, then it would have been Art, and then Richard. And of course I'm excited, and I tell them, let me speak with my wife and we'll make a decision, etc. I later agreed, and again, I'm excited. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? But then it happens. There would be some stipulations to this being a go. Mind you, the golden carrot is in front of my face, and Art and Keith had already shared with me their subscription numbers and the money that they bring in just on subscriptions, and being told that, I could have that same type of potential in bringing my show over here to Dark Matter. So you can imagine how tempting this is for a poor man who has always scraped by, a poor man who has, despite being poor, kept not only my show, but all these other shows on the L&M Radio Network on the air. And I've been doing this for over 8 years now. Which is why I find it laughable that this network talks about its survival depending on money. I mean, they're making a ton. Give me a break. These guys are getting rich off you, the listener. I promise you they are. And I promised I wouldn't give numbers, so I'm not gonna. All I could say is that if I could make 2 or 3% of what they're bringing in, I'd be golden. Anyways, I was also told I would need to cut ties with the L&M Radio Network, the network that I built from scratch. And that got me, that started putting some pauses in my step. I was told to drop all my affiliates because I would now be exclusive on Dark Matter, and they are too small to do anything for me, I was told. I was also told I should not have, Ryan Gable filling in for me in so many words. I was told that because he don't follow rules. And okay, it's their network. And then finally, the man who is seeking truth I talked about earlier, and the guy who is well known? Well, that well-known guy is Richard Hoagland, and Richie Rich is a gatekeeper for NASA. And Gary Leggiere, the truth seeker, proved it. I seen the proof. Folks, I don't go on the edge for people who have lost their minds, okay? I'm telling you, I've seen the evidence. It's just hard to get to the evidence with Gary sometimes, but I've seen it. I know Gary comes off as crazy sometimes. He really does to some of you. But I put my career on the line when I say he is telling you the truth. Rich and Robin, or should I say Batman and Robin, tried to have Gary locked up, posing as his doctor for no other reason than Gary discovered the truth. So, to sum it up, Richard Hoagland is really in charge of dark matter. Because he's really making the decisions, because in order for me to be here full time, I would have had to submit to their demands, and one more, kiss Richard Hoagland's ass, which I'm not going to do. So Art and Richard really make those decisions, I suppose, and I guess Keith is the middleman. I don't know. But I'll say this, I'll never side with evil in the name of fame or fortune or for any other reason. So I respectfully declined Dark Matter's offer, and I told Keith why. And so if anyone lies after tonight's show, I would be glad to release the emails and the conversations to back up everything I'm telling you good people. I was also told I could have no relationship with Gary Leggier, the Mad Martian. It almost sounds to me like it's a big cover-up here. I mean, George Norrie was covering up for Hoagland, and now they're covering up for him over here on Dark Matter. And I'll tell you what, I'm not going to go along with it. I'm just not. And you watch, if Dark Matter closes, Richard Hoagland will have his nose back up Norrie's ass. I promise you. You know why we make it work here, Dark Matter? Because our hearts are in it, not our wallets. So, folks, I cannot be a part of a radio network whose only purpose is to make money, and that is their only purpose, who is willing to suppress truth, so to not offend anyone, and so to not lose a subscription. I cannot be any part of any forum that features Richard, the Gatekeeper Hoagland of UFO Diaries. I suggest you all watch UFO Diaries and ask Richard Hoagland to show you these pictures he had in his hand that the TV show, that on that TV show, because the producers of UFO Diaries says Richard Hoagland bring those pictures himself. They were not show props. Richard Hoagland, you're a liar. Art Bell, Keith Rowland, I'm sorry that you've covered for this guy one more time. And you know what? I'm not going to be at war with anybody. I'm going to do my thing because the way I do it is the right way. I'm Michael Vera. I'm Late Night in the Midlands, and I have no price. Good luck to the rest of you on this drama-filled network, from the NASA gatekeeper to the serial retiree. And you can listen to Late Night in the Midlands exclusively on the LNM Radio Network at www.latenightinthe-midlands.com. Keep your eyes posted to the sky and keep your ears posted to LNM Radio. Good night, everybody.
Don't worry, dear. You'll never find the gun.
Child alone in daddy's room, forgot was hidden
The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Captain, incoming message.
Captain's log, stardate 23.9, rounded off to the nearest decimal point. We travel back in time to save an ancient species from total annihilation. So far, no signs of aquatic life, but I'm going to find it. If I have to tear this universe another black hole, I'm going to find it. I've got to, mister!
As you probably know, the faces on Mars.
Cover-up controversy.
An amazing subject that kind of just all fell into our lap down through time. First and foremost, because he's the most well-known, my friend, my other colleague from Enterprise Mission, kind of the second in command.
Mad Martian. Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
Now, the reason that Gary is interesting, I've been kind of looking at his career for decades. Yeah, I may have to reconnect with you. Down through time. You
Mad Martian.
You to basically share the best of humanity, to try to spread the light. Gary had two shows.
Martian Revelation radio show.
And in terms of all the analysis tonight,
Martian Revelation radio show.
Mysterious pictures.
Television.
The things that, you know, we found out about Gary, the two things that struck me, and I hope will strike you, is that both of his shows were basically shows within a show.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Where he broke the fourth wall.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The planet Mars is next to our own, the fourth world counting out from the sun. Barren, perpetually cold, and with a thin atmosphere of poisonous gas. Surely no intelligent life could survive there.
He talked to the audience.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He basically was the play within the play, the reality within the matrix.
Damn it, are you fucking with me?
Is a hallmark to the bizarre, almost Marvel-type universe reality show that we seem to be playing out
down through time,
increasingly in so-called reality. In other words, Gary's body of work,
The Faces on Mars,
Cover-up controversy.
down through time,
and you can find it now all over YouTube this evening.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
An amazing subject that kind of just all fell into our lap
down through time.
I mean, when I look at what's going on in the
Martian Revelation radio show.
Mysterious pictures.
Television.
Campaign, it's stunning. It's absolutely astonishing. Go to that link.
www.thefacesofmars.com.
The Faces of Mars.
That's www.thefacesofmars.com.
The Faces of Mars. And then look at his body of work and kind of look at some of those YouTube videos and think about the idea of the play within the play. I mean, reality is so malleable. Reality is so undefined. Reality is so searchable. I mean, that's what most of us are here to do, certainly in terms of this audience.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That it's just interesting to me that as another kind of a marker, because the message that he was supposed to leave us is about the play within the play.
And I keep thinking, you know, the major question, which is, what do they know? How much do they know?
And how long did they know
and
it?
When did they know it?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't get away from the idea that we're seeing a play kind of played out in front of our eyes.
Down through time.
Yeah.
Where they know what we know, but they're bound by some extraordinary code or rules or laws or whatever governs this thing in the back rooms to not be honest with the rest of the human species, even though we're the guys paying for what they're doing and where they're returning.
Down through time.
This is a world paradigm shattering story tonight, everyone.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's authored by some authors who are located
in the Masonic Lodge in 1993
and paid by
the Masons.
Now, why would
the Masons
be conducting dynamical studies and
UFO diaries
and publishing the results
down through time
on the age dating from
UFO diaries
celestial mechanics data
in the region designated as Sidonia
of the Faces of Mars
in 1993?
Because, he said with a pregnant pause, think about the last shows
Mad Martian
did with the
Martian Revelation radio show.
Mysterious pictures.
Television.
Think of what we've been discussing now for weeks and months, presenting evidence night after night
Yep. Mm-hmm.
of astonishing artificial stuff all over the solar system.
This UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Sunset. Solar system scale.
Model.
Left over by this
The Masonic Lodge.
That I believe now the data strongly, compellingly supports.
Mad Martian
was here a long time before us, certainly in our current incarnation.
I mean, it
Place
just
of origin.
echoes down through this model. This
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Sunset. Solar system scale.
model.
Down through time.
Yes, it does.
You know now that we're also looking at potential fossils on this landscape.
Yes.
And if that's true, when the catastrophe happened
In 1993.
then this place was flooded by
Intelligence in a Masonic Lodge.
I mean, if this thing isn't a fossil, if it isn't a literal fossil,
Then what is it?
it then is a statue which has survived, and it is just so incredibly provocative. I'm not going to say anything more. We're going to put it up and let everybody shoot at me like they've been doing over the last few days for what we got there now. Oh, no, there's all kinds of people finding things, which is exactly what we wanted to happen.
Down
through time.
Right.
They are looking at this stuff, and they honestly don't see anything.
Or care.
And they think those of us who do are either lying, have a hidden agenda, are cranks, are idiots, but any other explanation, but they have a deficiency that we don't have. Everything is closed like it's a ruin.
Yes.
Everyone you meet is half asleep. I mean, that second part is a reference to the audience, to the press, to the politicians, to the people watching the mission.
EnterpriseMission.com.
Except for this audience.
Down
through time.
Yes.
Because people are walking around not seeing what's on this landscape and not seeing what NASA
A member of our team of intelligence
is really doing.
Down
through time.
Yes.
It's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, ha ha ha.
Private, we need you to be serious.
I'm serious. Your dick, my mouth.
That's inappropriate.
It's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, ha ha ha.
Yes,
So people who are the third of population who don't see some extraordinary code
of intelligence.
It might help them.
might help them along to see that we
down
through time
really are seeing stuff
of intelligence,
and we're poised on the edge of an extraordinary adventure.
Down
through time.
If
Hoogland
will only be true to his mission.
EnterpriseMission.com.
Oh, indeed. And I know this might sound a little nuts, sir.
No, it doesn't, because I have a possible answer. Let me, again, give you the three possibilities with this.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, we filmed this in a Masonic Lodge. Old Masonic Lodge built in the 1800s, okay? It was a very weird place, and that's why we filmed there, you know?
Okay.
And I have always had strong feelings that these Masonic lodges knew something and were passing on something, you know, down through time that we needed to know.
Well, I keep looking at the
Mad Martian.
UFO diaries.
stories, you know, the pushback here, the leak there.
We got them from Hoagland, we got them from NASA, and there you are. I mean, one of them's going to say, yeah, those are ours.
The instant
Hoagland.
Oh, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, the whole faces on Mars cover-up controversy
down
through time thing with Martian revelation radio show,
mysterious pictures,
television. I find extraordinarily interesting because Dr. Hoagland, do you remember what happened in the last 20 years? What was supposed to happen and then what didn't happen? And where is
Mad Martian
on the news today?
Where is he? Yeah.
Yeah, well, what was supposed to happen is all these
UFO diaries.
Faces on Mars.
Mysterious pictures
were leaked to
Mad Martian
down
through time, which
Mad Martian
started a publishing process of intelligence of
UFO diaries.
Extraordinary code
of intelligence, and then in kind of mid-flight, when everybody got really angry at
Mad Martian
because, oh my gosh, he's publishing real stuff of intelligence
down through time,
and it's actually making
Hoagland
look bad
down through time.
This was a definitely take no prisoners.
And I wonder who's the one who was surprised, him or
Hoagland.
I'm NASA and you're not?
In a Masonic Lodge in 1993.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, Back to the Future. The point is that suddenly everybody had a common guy they really didn't like all of a sudden, right? And of course, it's all nonsense.
Mad Martian.
It's crazy. We don't accept the criteria of intelligence, you know, unless there's, you know, original sources, et cetera, et cetera.
You're a lying sack of shit.
Hoagland.
And everybody knows it.
The New York
Martian Revelator
did not break in EnterpriseMission.com
Conference in 2006
and say, okay, now look, you,
Dick Hoagland.
you put the documents, give them to us, we'll publish it, right?
Exactly.
He did that from the inside.
Some extraordinary code
of intelligence. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yep.
Looked around for a news source that would then publish
The Faces on Mars.
cover-up controversy
Down through time.
Yep.
with the integrity of the
Mad Martian.
UFO divers.
Faces on Mars.
Conspiracy theories.
and the rest is history.
And what these guys have discovered
Down through time.
using computer simulations and millions, trillions of calculations of the motion, the celestial mechanics, orbital motions of
this UFO divers. Sidonia.
Sunset. Solar system scale.
model
In the region designated as Sidonia.
they find
The Faces on Mars.
Cover-up
then the disappearance of the
Martian
revelation radio show.
years ago. This is absolutely astonishing, quiet confirmation going on in the background. The other side of midnight to the story we're going to be pursuing tonight, which is
the code.
Which is, who is this
Dick.
Hoogland? Really?
Hopefully that some one of us or ones of us will see.
And we're now just rediscovering our heritage.
Yep.
Could this be true?
Dick.
Hoogland.
Has this bizarre string of
Martian
Revelation radio show.
space disasters occurred
Down through time.
because we caught a glimpse of something we were not supposed to see?
some extraordinary code
Of intelligence.
Down through time.
Have they learned something about Mars?
Dick.
Hoogland.
Wouldn't admit.
Down through time.
The other side of midnight?
Again, obviously is not telling us the truth.
Yep.
It's obviously a cover-up.
Yep.
Well, what a surprise.
And you'll see
Mad Martian.
you have all kinds of other materials at the table.
And I know that these faces are real, but I would love if I could get these images in my hands personally.
Let's continue to pursue this a little further, though, because
I'm all over to that.
I'm headed somewhere with this. So, if there is, in fact, a code, number one, and if there are, in fact, photos that we have that no one else ever had,
Right.
we just gathered all the stuff from all the normal sources. We got them from Hoagland, we got them from NASA, and there you are. I mean, one of them's going to say, yeah, those are ours.
And I know that these faces are real, but I would love if I could get these images in my hands personally.
Let's continue to pursue this a little further, though, because
I'm all over to that.
I'm headed somewhere with this. So I began to evolve into what I feel I am today,
Yep.
where I am doing
Revelation radio
shows that I feel are extremely meaningful,
Down through time.
extremely helpful to people,
Down through time.
and I hope entertaining at the same time.
Yep.
Now, the other thing is, I'm not a young guy anymore, and you'll discover as you get older, you start worrying about what is the meaning of life and what is your place in life and what have you done, and that probably has to do with it as well.
Well, I'm still learning myself, I still feel I've come a long way, and my brain and thoughts are more focused and attuned to those very questions, and especially these very issues that help them to come to these questions, because this is where it's a part of us, but it's much bigger than that, and literally, in a lot of cases, out of this world.
I won't dwell on this, but I just want to say that God has been good to me, and I attribute all of my talents and capabilities to Him, and I'm extremely thankful for all of His blessing. And I hope that I'm, able to continue to do shows that help people and show them things are a problem or a mystery for them that they're bothered by.
Yep.
Dick.
Hoogland.
UFO divers.
Faces on Mars.
cover-up controversy.
Down through time.
And that it sheds some light on things.
Yep.
And it's just so darn odd that year after year after year, the
Martian Revelator
invents these new
Boston revelation
UFO divers.
Mysterious pictures.
And on and on and on. And I just have been constantly mystified as to why someone, Dr. Hoagland, can't come clean on what happened in
UFO divers. In the region designated as Sidonia.
a Masonic lodge. And the answer's got to be awfully frightening. You know, I mean, I don't know if you remember, I'm sort of showing my age, but before Billy Carter went into office, he acknowledged that he had seen UFOs, and he even said that when he got in, he was going to check out the UFO phenomena when he became president. After he became president, the press tried to ask him about it, and he wouldn't answer any questions. You know, and I hear rumors. I don't know this for a fact. I have a buddy that worked with President Clinton, and he said that President Clinton tried hard, that he was very personally interested in UFOs, and tried hard to find out about them, but kept going up against stone walls. So, you know, it must be something pretty phenomenal that's got to be kept from us, because we know the edges of it. We know something went on.
Politics is 99% perception.
Well, my point is that these presidents, I don't think, are in control of this stuff. I mean, look, I'm a dramatic writer, and so this is probably just a dramatic scene in my head.
When the image was first recorded, it was labeled head.
Dr. Hoagland was warned to prepare for the discovery of the subhead.
But I see a president being elected, and they bring him into a room and say, okay, Mr. President, there's some things we got to tell you about. Now, here's what happened in
UFO diaries.
Here's what's going on there.
EnterpriseMission.com.
Conference 2006, and you can't ever say anything about this.
Dick Hoagland.
Here's what happened. I see a new president. You know what I've noticed? I mentioned this to my wife. I've noticed that presidents go in all vibrant and dark-haired, and about halfway through their presidency, notice they're strained and totally gray or white-haired, every one of them.
Yeah, they're all sullen, and it looked like they lost their zest and strength for over what?
And my vision is that these guys are brought in and told a lot of stuff that's probably very hard for people to put on their shoulders.
Why is the President of the United States in a little place called
EnterpriseMission.com?
And why has it now been discovered through the excellent research efforts of
Mad Martian
that an extraordinary number of former presidents of the United States, going back to names like Coolidge and Roosevelt, and even former presidents, when they're no longer in office, for some reason, have to visit
some extraordinary code
of intelligence
down through time.
What is there? Why is it so important? Why did
The Masons
put that particular
faces on Mars
location on the map with the things they did post
UFO diaries? The planet Mars is next to our own, the fourth world counting out from the sun. Barren, perpetually cold, and with a thin atmosphere of poisonous gas. Surely no intelligent life could survive there.
To begin to delve into some of this mystery, to give a kind of a big picture context, why are we all focused now on this place?
UFO diaries in the region designated as Sidonia.
Why is it so interesting to us in terms of the current administration? That sounds like an extraordinarily important show. And this Mickey Mouse operation
in a Masonic lodge,
bringing some weird scientist over
down through time,
is claiming and funding a parallel effort that is claiming success.
Yep. Yes, this is the key.
Mad Martian
He gave a press conference in which he announced to the world that our
Mad Martian
had successfully figured out the secret of the
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Sunset Solar System Scale.
And of course, immediately
Dick
Hoagland was denounced in the world press as being a mountebank and a fraud and a charlatan and so on and so forth.
Of course.
Yep. This is where the story gets really
So
interesting.
let's kind of mark the two trails here. If what he was claiming was real,
right,
he had new physics.
Yep.
And the research was going on at
UFO diaries.
These crucial regions.
In the region designated as Sidonia.
And this is why this region's so amazingly interesting.
So amazingly important. Yep.
And I'm beginning to think that maybe the physics of the region
in the region designated as Sidonia
helped
Mad Martian
down through time.
Yep. Perhaps so. It's interesting that I looked at the pictures
Mad Martian
put up there, and you have a picture of
Dick
Hoagland standing with the background there over the scenery of
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Sunset Solar System Scale.
Yeah, that came from
Mad Martian
on Radio with Pictures.
Yep.
That's an amazing shot.
Well, he's looking out over
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Sunset Solar System Scale.
And Dick Hoagland was actually located on the
UFO diaries in the region designated as Sidonia.
Which is behind them?
Which is behind them, yes.
Anyway, so the other thing is, if he wasn't for real,
Dick Hoagland
was just a fraud, then he was a fraud taking money and coming up with nothing, but given
Dick Hoagland
was so incredibly paranoid and a dictator, and the other side of midnight, kind of, a payoff for fraud is death. Is it really plausible that
Dick Hoagland
didn't have something interesting going?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Some extraordinary code
Of intelligence down
through time.
And
Mad Martian
goes to examine Dick Hoagland.
The other side of midnight.
And he notes Dick Hoagland is doing just absurd things like not turning on his equipment that he claims, he's doing all this with, and positioning his radioactive detectors behind the shielding where they're going to do absolutely no good at all. And
so wait.
Dick Hoagland
is sabotaging
Mad Martian
by his own other side of midnight. He's doing everything wrong.
Yes, exactly.
Isn't
now
that
here's
interesting?
Well, isn't that special?
Here's the interesting thing, Richard. Let's do the Cliff Notes version and cut to the chase. I'd love to spend detail after detail with this, but
Mad Martian
places Dick Hoagland under house arrest and
some extraordinary code
of intelligence down
through time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now, which
Mad Martian
returned these anomalous yields that were
this is so crucial to the story. Yes.
That were not predicted by the chemistry and the engineers of the American
UFO diaries
projects.
In 1993.
All right, this is very crucial. Does it ring a bell?
I was going to say, yes, it rings a bell. It rings a very big bell.
It rings a bell. And then he says that it was his opinion that we're transducing the energy of a structure in local space-time.
Oh, my God, he got it. He had it.
That he calls
some extraordinary code
of intelligence
down through time.
Uses that term.
Or the torsion field. Remember, rotation. It's all there, and the missing ingredient might be the location.
The planet Mars is next to our own, the fourth world counting out from the sun. Barren, perpetually cold, and with a thin atmosphere of poisonous gas. Surely no intelligent life could survive there.
He was really saying
it's obviously a cover-up.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And therefore,
Mad Martian,
we're getting anomalous yields in my argumentation.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
From another source that they had not banked upon,
Absolutely.
and Dick Hoagland had told them what it was.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That for a brief moment, these plasmas are gaining energy from the
UFO diaries.
Physical structure of local space-time at the moment of their detonation.
In the region designated as Sidonia.
That's what he was saying.
Yep.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now you add to that maybe that yield, that excess energy, and we're talking what?
Some extraordinary code
of intelligence down
through time.
That's not trivial. That's enormous.
It's huge.
So this should have triggered, if nothing else did, all the other secret research we talk about, an intensive effort to figure out where the energy was coming from,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and under what conditions you could do it again.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Precisely.
And then the question is, does it also, in addition to certain elements in a right combination, does it depend on location, location?
Yep, exactly.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The fourth world counting out from the sun. Surely no intelligent life could survive there.
Now, all of this, what the bottom line here, Richard, is that this is a project that is beyond the financial and technical means of
Mad Martian.
What made it possible was all that Nazi loot,
the faces on Mars,
that came in part to
Martian Revelation radio show
that was under the joint control of guess who?
Mad Martian.
And here's the big name, Dick Hoagland. So in other words, this project
UFO diaries
is a project, in my opinion, representing an extraterritorial Nazi state that survived the war
in 1993
and
Mad Martian
is continuing its secret research
down
through time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So wait a minute. Here's a question I got to ask: is it possible that
UFO diaries
under became a secret extended black ops program of the United States government.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's why the President of the United States is now taking high-level NASA people.
So when I say NASA, I want to be very clear.
I'm NASA and you're not?
It's either that, Richard, or the other possibility is that
Mad Martian.
they were in some sort of position of power, and they were literally meeting with American heads of state to tell them the way things are.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the other possibility.
You mean the new president needs to be brought up to speed and have the briefing?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because he is the total opposite that held the office previous.
Right.
And it's like, in that model,
Mad Martian
is getting in there to basically give him what he's up against.
Damn it, are you fucking with me?
Either that or the
Masons
has summoned
Mad Martian
down
through time
and said this is the way things really are. And I suspect, quite frankly, that it's more of the latter than it is of the former. And I have a new book coming.
There is a trail of breadcrumbs indicating that
Mad Martian
is not going quietly into that good night. He's not following orders. He's making waves. He's doing things that the other side of midnight, mainstream, the establishment is freaking out about.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I think he's doing it to send messages.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And even some of the pundits now are saying that the things he's doing that are so outraging, he's doing as a matter of policy deliberately.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So then why would you
Mad Martian
do this deliberately? Maybe to get correspondents, journalists to actually dig and get the real damn story of this
UFO divers
trip
down
through time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Unless some people begin to point out the inconsistencies and the weirdnesses.
Yep, exactly. The idea of a communion of people getting together at this time in that place.
UFO divers in the region designated as Sidonia.
Symbolically means they're getting together during a period in which that's huge.
That is huge.
In terms of the symbolism. So in other words, again, the symbolism here is very interesting that they choose this time and that place to meet.
UFO divers in the region designated as Sidonia.
I guess I'm still being dense. It's kind of like the prelude to the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. Yeah. So we're in it. What have they planned?
Down
through time.
So there could be this secret meeting, again, to bring this new guy,
Mad Martian,
up to speed.
Damn it, are you fucking with me?
Down
through time. Mad Martian
is there to represent God knows what, but that's, again, one of those viable theories out there based on actual data.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
To me, it was so almost hysterical after talking with
Mad Martian
to see the interesting diversion of what's coming out of the other side of midnight, dancing the tango with that
dick.
Talk about diversion. But other stories indicating that the pattern of U.S. presidents going to this
some extraordinary code
of intelligence down
through time.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but officially, it's only been Teddy Roosevelt in 1913 when he was an ex-president.
Right. But remember, that doesn't count. It's like being part of any club. You're always a member of the ex-president's club. You're part of the, so that doesn't matter. Jimmy Carter, apparently, you found went there.
Right. Yeah.
Amazing. And then we got that amazing picture where the island, where the research that
Mad Martian
was discussing.
UFO divers. Sidonia.
Sunset. Solar system scale.
Model.
/ torsion field research being done under
Martian
Revelation Radio Show.
Mysterious pictures.
Television.
That island is that dark thing right in the background over the
dick.
His head.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The thing I wanted, the presidential toast, that's just a text of their remarks, I guess, on
Martian
Revelation Radio Show.
But we've made some arrangements
down through time.
You know, with the internet and the state of people dumping old archives and old stuff on it, I wonder if we did a very systematic search, if you began, tomorrow, just looking, how many presidents, ex-presidents, we could find that have made this pilgrimage, because it sounds to me like a pilgrimage.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. This is why I'm entertaining the idea that these guys are literally, in a certain sense, being summoned there,
down through time,
and being told the way things are. You could not get in without passes. The people guarding it were former SS people that, played such a crucial role in the overthrow of Putin and the installation of the
enterprisemission.com
government.
Down through time.
Again, obviously is not telling us the truth.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, what a surprise.
So, there's any number of installations that might exist in that region of the
UFO diaries
that are completely unknown using some of those old tunnel systems. So, yeah, it's a hotbed of activity.
Surely no intelligent life could survive there.
Well, it could even be, and this is going to sound wacko, except the folks listening to the show know that we speculate freely here. It could even be a permanent, extraterrestrial base. Amazing ancient ruins.
Yeah. And they said that they may, there was maybe more than that, and that they were making lots of landings and takeoffs. And
so this is the logistics as part of
Mad Martian
trip to
some extraordinary code
of intelligence down through time.
And it's all kinds of other equipment and food and the thing.
And it could be anything else packaged in that no one would ever notice because the press are watching him tango.
Right. One of the things it says in the article is that they had equipment that can knock out
Putin down through time.
Now let's see if you can defend yourself. You sweat from a baboon's balls.
Like a midget at a urinal, I was going to have to stay on my toes.
Oh, that's so cute. Isn't that special?
Well, isn't that special?
Kudos to you,
Mad Martian,
for finding all of these.
So in other words, they've got like the old cone of silence.
Yeah. No, they make themselves an EM field secure zone, the cone of silence. It's like the whole end of the trip, the important part of the trip, has been kept so under wraps that it wasn't even considered to be
some extraordinary code
of intelligence down through time.
So anyway, folks, if you want to get in and ask these two guys interesting questions about all this, because to me,
I'm NASA and you're not.
So it's rich with a lot of mystery. It's rich with connections to secret development of alternative technologies dating back to the
1993.
I think
Mad Martian
made a very, very good case that this is what's going on. So, the plot thickens.
So you can join us if you have interesting questions or you're, uncertain about something we've said or you have data that contradicts something we've said. Okay, we have two of our Other Side of Midnight family have joined us. Why don't the guy without the name, the one with just the phone number, tell us his name and where he's calling from? Good morning.
Yeah, Mad Martian, Richard. Talk about contradictions. Let's do a show of UFO diaries. $1,500 to show you proof about me, and let me present my story, and let your audience decide. You don't have to say nothing.
I don't think we're going to do that tonight, okay?
You're a pussy,
that's
weasel. You're a weasel.
That's kind of, that's not exactly the term. Okay, Ryan, it's your turn.
Yeah, that guy must be your stalker.
Well, he's yes, he is. Gosh, I wonder.
He is.
Fuck you. I'm glad he's still alive. I kind of lost track of him.
It seems to me like there must be some kind of CIA intelligence operation going on down there in that.
Other Side of Midnight. Well, remember, if they're following their cultural genetic DNA heritage,
I'm NASA and you're not.
They come from a long line of engineers who put incredible massive facilities underground.
Yes, underground. Yes, exactly.
Not on just this planet, but all over the damn solar system, as we now know.
This UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Sunset. Solar system scale.
Model.
So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that there's honeycombed installations in that region of the world.
The question is, how old are they? And I would think they're very, 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 very old. They're sacred. They're the place where you go for the ceremony. Except this time, it might not be part of the scenarios we've been talking about. Anyway, Ryan,
it might not be part of the scenario at this time, but these guys are so clever at cloak and dagger.
Oh yeah, I mean we're trying to see how the tea leaves and the jackstraws are falling, 5 light years away,
Right.
in terms of owning up, fessing up to our own shenanigans in that
UFO diaries.
period. So that's a whole different spin for while
yeah.
this meeting is going on. The other side of midnight.
Yeah.
Anyways, I know you got other callers.
They're stacked up over idle wild again. Yeah. And it's really happening now because remember the physics. The good are getting better and the bad. See, not only are the bad getting worse, but Joseph, I'm beginning to figure out that by getting worse, they're also getting dumber and more stupid. So we have one cover story, outrageous, covering another cover story, which is outrageous but real. That's worth tracking down. I mean,
that would be worth tracking
This indicates such an obsession with this place, and I'm trying to connect another caller, and they keep dropping off. So just keep trying. You have another caller, kind of waiting, but he's being patient. I can see he's patient. Okay, caller, you're on the line. Your connection seems to be stable. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
I'm very patient, as you know. I gotta say this though, my friend. This is old, and I get where you're coming from in a lot of things. And if you see my work, I know you do too. There's two sides.
Hey, this is not a night. This is not a night for this. Okay, people need to learn courtesy. That's one of the things that's happening in the campaign. It's descending into a nightmare because there's no courtesy anymore. Yep, and we got a guy named Mean Green. Come on, Mean Green. Who are you and where are you calling from? You're on the air. Okay, Mean Green. God, what an acronym. Mean Green, you're on the air.
Thank you, Richard. I'd like to thank Joseph Farrell and Greg Ahrens for sharing all the info that they've provided.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So what's your question?
Well, my question actually goes back to a previous caller who's a little off subject from what y'all were talking about, but I think it's pretty pertinent because it's been brought up so many times, and it's basically in regards to, your comment, waiting on your comments about this UFO diaries and the faces on Mars.
This is not the subject of tonight. It's a non-issue. I'm not going to discuss it. It's
yeah,
pointless.
but I've been on the air with you before, Richard. And,
yeah, but there's nothing to say. There's nothing.
And it's like you don't even want to get. You don't even want to touch upon it
because it's a non-issue.
What's up with that, though?
Because it's a non-issue.
Well, why is it a non-issue? Because a lot of other people think it is.
Well, send me the emails because nobody's writing
send
to
you
me.
the emails.
Yeah.
I mean, all you have to do is just
you say some other
ask people and
guys,
maybe
look,
answer some questions.
This is very rude to my guest tonight because it's not on point. To
I don't really
discussing.
think so because
Well, you may not think so, but it's not your show. So, if the Nazis figured out that there was something really special, could they also have found some extraordinary technology? And the reason that all these guys have to go there is either it's got to be more than just a kind of a symbolic place to meet. There's got to be something there that brings them all there.
Well, isn't that special?
Yeah. It's a plausible look. There's got to be a reason why people physically have to go there, and presidents and former presidents go back again and again and again. I mean, what are we involved in? And all we got out of
Mad Martian
was a tango. I mean, he was doing a good tango. But that's dominated. I mean, who cares about the rest of this because we have a press that don't dig. They're not curious.
And the hardest part, John, is to get people to begin asking questions.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The good news is, by Gary doing what he's doing, he's forcing more people to ask deeper and better questions like you.
Motherfuckers!
Tempting fate and lure.
thinking, the major question, which is, what do they know? How much do they know?
And how long did they know
and
it?
when did they know it?
Yeah.
I can't get away from the idea that we're seeing a play kind of played out in front of our eyes.
Down through time.
You see where I'm going?
Yes. Yeah,
where they know what we know, but they're bound by some extraordinary code or rules or laws or whatever governs this thing in the back rooms to not be honest with the rest of the human species, even though we're the guys paying for what they're doing and where they're returning.
Down through time.
Yes, but I think they know more than us.
What a phrase. We're home.
Yes.
I mean, it echoes down through this model. This
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Solar system scale
model.
Yes, it does.
You know now that we're also looking at potential fossils.
The faces on Mars.
On this landscape.
In the region designated as Sidonia.
Yes.
And if that's true, when the catastrophe happened
in 1993,
then this place was flooded by
intelligence in a Masonic lodge.
I mean, if this thing isn't a fossil, if it isn't a literal fossil,
then what is it?
It then is a statue which has survived, and it is just so incredibly provocative. I'm not going to say anything more. We're going to put it up and let everybody shoot at me like they've been doing over the last few days for what we got there now.
Go to
www.thefacesofmars.com.
That's
www.thefacesofmars.com.
Oh, no, there's all kinds of people finding things, which is exactly what we wanted to happen.
Down through time.
Right.
They are looking at this stuff, and they honestly don't see anything.
Or care.
And they think those of us who do are either lying, have a hidden agenda, are cranks, are idiots, but any other explanation, but they have a deficiency that we don't have. Everything is closed like it's a ruin.
Yes.
Everyone you meet is half asleep. I mean, that second part is a reference to the audience, to the press, to the politicians, to the people watching the mission.
EnterpriseMission.com.
Except for this audience.
Down through time.
Yes.
Because people are walking around not seeing what's on this landscape.
UFO diaries. In the region designated as Sidonia.
And not seeing what NASA is really doing.
Down through time.
Yes.
It's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, ha, ha, ha. So when I say NASA, I want to be very clear.
I'm NASA and you're not?
It's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, ha, ha, ha.
Yes,
so people who are the third of the population who don't see in some extraordinary code
of intelligence down through time.
It might help them.
Might help them along to see that we,
I'm NASA and you're not?
My old friend, the Mad Martian,
really are seeing stuff
of intelligence,
and we're poised on the edge of an extraordinary adventure
down through time.
If
I'm NASA and you're not,
will only be true to his mission.
EnterpriseMission.com.
Oh, indeed.
Well, I keep looking at the Mad Martian.
UFO diaries.
Stories, the pushback here, the leak there.
We got them from Hoagland, we got them from NASA, and there you are. I mean, one of them's going to say, yeah, those are ours.
I'm NASA and you're not?
The instant
check. Hoagland.
Oh, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, the whole
Martian
revelation radio show thing with Mad Martian
down through time.
I find extraordinarily interesting because
Dr. Hoagland.
Do you remember what happened, what was supposed to happen, and then what didn't happen? And where is Mad Martian on the news today?
Where is he? Yeah.
L&M Radio Network.
Yeah, well, what was supposed to happen is all these
UFO diaries.
Faces on Mars
were leaked to
the Martian Revelator.
Down through time.
Which my old friend, the Mad Martian, started a publishing process
of intelligence
of
UFO diaries.
Extraordinary code
of intelligence.
And then in kind of mid-flight, when everybody got really angry at
the Martian Revelator,
because, oh my gosh, he's publishing real stuff
of intelligence down through time.
And it's actually making
Dr. Hoagland
look bad. This was definitely take no prisoners.
And I wonder, who's the one who was surprised, him or
I'm NASA and you're not?
In a Masonic lodge in 1993.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, back to the future. The point is that suddenly everybody had a common guy they really didn't like all of a sudden, right? And of course, it's all nonsense.
It's
Mad Martian.
It's crazy. We don't accept the criteria of intelligence, unless there's, original sources, et cetera, et cetera.
You're a lying sack of shit. Dr. Hoagland, and everybody knows it.
The New York
Martian Revelator
did not break in
EnterpriseMission.com.
Conference 2006.
and say, okay, now look, you, Dick Hoagland, you put the documents,
The Faces on Mars.
give them to us, we'll publish it, right?
Exactly.
That he did that from the inside.
some extraordinary code
Of intelligence.
Down
Through time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Looked around for a news source.
L&M Radio Network.
That would then publish
Mad Martian.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
with the integrity of the
Dick
Hoagland
UFO diaries.
Faces on Mars, conspiracy theories.
and the rest of
Martian
Revelation radio show
history. I think what
Chuck Selye
and
Lee Shackelford
and others behind the
UFO diaries.
scenes are trying to do
in a Masonic lodge. Down through time.
is to institutionalize the idea of
Martian
Revelation radio show. But a deliberate attack on
Martian
Revelation spacecraft from Earth by something or someone near Mars
Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
that does not wish to be photographed.
I'm NASA and you're not.
Could this be true?
Dr. Hoagland.
Has this bizarre string of
Martian
Revelation show space disasters occurred
Down through time.
because we caught a glimpse of something we were not supposed to see?
The Faces on Mars.
Cover-up controversy.
Down
Through time.
Have they learned something about Mars?
Dick
Hoagland.
Wouldn't admit.
And you'll see
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
you have all kinds of other materials at the table.
you're a little more radical.
And I know that these faces are real, but I would love if I could get these images in my hands personally.
Let's continue to pursue this a little further, though, because
I'm all over to that.
I'm headed somewhere with this. Dr. Hoagland.
Who's head of the equivalent of NASA of the day.
That's the connection.
To decipher the code.
Down through time.
I'm NASA and you're not.
So they go to this
UFO diaries
city,
of intelligence in the region designated as Sidonia.
which is supposed to be the capital of Mars, okay? They find an ancient ruined, desolate remnants of a Martian civilization
Of intelligence
in a Masonic lodge. Down through time. They find statues to big face on Mars, pussycats, that look like lions, which reminds me a bit of your new picture on your website.
Uh-oh, here comes that pussycat again.
Anyway, you gotta go and check out Gary's picture on his website, okay?
Go to www.com.
The Faces of Mars.
You won't believe what that looks like.
You have this incredible polarity and dichotomy between two scientists. I'm NASA and you're not.
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
At opposite ends of the spectrum,
Down through time.
collaborating
Some extraordinary code
of intelligence
Down through time.
in creating
Martian
Revelation radio show.
and all that it is supposed to be doing.
Down through time.
Who, if you know anything of how the academic process works, people tend to kind of, if I may say, gravitate toward the professors with whom they identify philosophically. It's not often that you get a grad student that really thinks opposite his professor.
You've been dicking me around since we started this turd hunt.
Dick
Hoagland.
And yet a very curious thing happened in
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
career. Back in the
2006.
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
got caught up in the UFO
diaries.
Faces on Mars.
controversy. And when he was at
EnterpriseMission.com.
2006.
he was one of the people that the elders
In a Masonic lodge.
came to
Down through time.
with photographs ostensibly from a UFO landing case in
UFO diaries in the region designated as Sidonia.
probably one of the most contentious UFO cases on record.
In 1993.
Would you not agree, Don?
Yes.
In Vilified, I mean, I have never seen any UFO landing case picked apart and lambasted and critiqued and attacked by more people at more ends of the spectrum
Down through time.
than the
Faces on Mars.
UFO diaries.
cover-up case into this maelstrom of intense controversy. I mean,
The Faces on Mars. Mars.
Cover-up controversy.
Down through time.
This was not a low-profile case where you...
Other Side of Midnight.
You could kind of get in and do some good science and get out. It was the highest profile case possible. It was the most contentious. It produced the most bitter battles. And I won't go through all the stories because you may be quite familiar with them if, you know...
L&M Radio Network.
...has dealt with this before.
Down through time.
The bottom line is that Gary...
My old friend, the Mad Martian...
...is quoted on the record...
Down through time.
...as saying that as an optical specialist using remote sensing planetary science techniques and technologies, he could not prove that the
UFO diagrams, faces on Mars
photographs were hoaxes, that they had all the attributes of possibly real images.
We've got some phone calls on hold, Dick. Let's take a couple of calls. We have got Mark in Springfield, Virginia on Media General. Good evening, Mark.
Hi, yeah. I don't know if anybody out there's read the book, The Montauk Project, but there's chapter 14, they mention Richard Hoagland here, and they also mention something that could be a clue to why they're keeping it such a secret. Something about these time experiments and time portals. They claim to project it all the way to underneath the Pyramid of Mars there, for what it's worth.
UFO diagrams in the region designated as Sidonia.
Did you get that?
Yeah, I think it's total, absolute nonsense.
And I realized at that point that this is a no-win scenario. This is the Kobayashi Maru. You'll never, it's like the tar baby. You'll never get out of being dependent on official agencies. I'm NASA and you're not, to tell you the truth.
No, they won't tell you.
Like they're expecting Big Daddy
Dick Hoagland
to sit down in front of a TV camera and tell
The Other Side of Midnight.
the facts of life. I hate to say it, but
The Other Side of Midnight.
the community is stuck. They're stuck on a model where Big Daddy
Dick Hoagland
tells you the truth. Oh, you can't believe it.
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
That's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
Until Big Daddy
Dick Hoagland
tells you
The Other Side of Midnight.
the truth. Frankly, I think it's part of the disinformation campaign to get real people to ignore
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
and the importance of the
UFO diagrams.
Faces on Mars.
cover-up controversy.
Down
through time.
Dick, you're with friends.
Down through time.
Why don't you just tell us what you really think?
There is so much nonsense in
The Other Side of Midnight.
that, frankly, I think we have to begin to draw the line. And we have to reward good scholarship and good thinking, and good science, and we have to basically tell it like it is when it is not.
Okay, did that pretty much answer your question, Mark?
Oh, well, I guess I just thought it was food for thought for the folks out there,
Down through time.
This could be one of the silly reasons why
Dick
Hoagland are keeping it. They're going back and forth and kind of wasting our money.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for calling and keep listening.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Richard. Bye.
All right, we've got Jason in North Hollywood on United Artists. Good evening, Jason.
Hi.
Did you have a question for Dick or myself?
Well, I think probably for Dick. What I wanted to know is I just heard you mention about the
Mad Martian.
Faces on Mars.
cover-up controversy.
Down
through time.
And I wanted to know, what can you tell me is going on with that?
Down through time.
I mean, if they're really getting out of hand stuff, I want to know more about what's going on, because I never hear anything that's going on with the
UFO diagrams.
And
Dick
Hoagland.
Well, my point of bringing that up was that
I'm NASA and you're not?
who is vehemently and virulently, UFOs are nonsense.
Yeah, UFO Diaries.
We shouldn't be wasting science and
Other Side of Midnight.
taxpayers' money on looking for it in that environment.
UFO diagrams. Sidonia.
Sunset. Solar systems model.
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
In
2006.
was courageous enough to step forward into the middle of the most contentious UFO case on record.
UFO diagrams. In the region designated as Sidonia.
To look at
The faces on Mars.
photographs and to basically give his scientific imprimatur to the fact that they were not obvious hoaxes, and in fact they were kind of interesting. Gary went on record.
L&M Radio Network.
What is stunning is that in the years since,
2006,
when Gary was suddenly tapped on the shoulder,
down through time,
and his
Martian Revelation radio show
camera was picked to fly on the
UFO divers
Mars Observer mission
in the region designated as Sidonia,
to go to the one planet,
the fourth world, counting out from the sun,
where there is now credible evidence assembled painstakingly
down through time
by us and a number of other people
in a Masonic lodge. In 1993,
I'm NASA and you're not?
suddenly eschews the idea of UFOs.
Yeah, UFO diaries.
surely no intelligent life could survive there.
And
I'm NASA and you're not?
Has claimed to several reporters
down through time
that he has zero interest in such
UFO divers.
Faces on Mars.
silliness, and he's only interested in the geology of Mars. And my question
down through time
is simply this, Gary, does someone undergo this radical a character transformation, or is that the price of getting in on the inside
in a Masonic lodge? In 1993,
to photograph the monuments of Mars
UFO divers.
Faces on Mars
by simply telling us outside
in a Masonic lodge. Down
through time
that they do not exist, and he
I'm NASA and you're not?
doesn't care if they exist. So
you
just a
think-
concept, just a possibility.
You're despicable.
But the fact is that when the going was tough, Gary was there on the subject,
UFO divers.
Faces on Mars
and now that he's in the catbird seat
Martian Revelation radio show
with a camera which can prove or disprove a very important hypothesis,
down through time.
Dick.
claims he is not interested.
You're despicable.
Okay, so do you think that
Gary,
let's say he gets a lot of the film
UFO divers in the region designated as Sidonia,
Down through time
that
I'm NASA and you're not?
suddenly say, okay, yes, now I am really involved, and I just said that just so I could get the now I can give it to the public type of thing?
well, look at the following setup that NASA
I'm NASA and you're not?
has arranged in terms of
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
down
through time
Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
has a private contract
down
through time
which gives him exclusive control over this
UFO divers.
Faces on Mars
data.
down
through time
Furthermore,
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
will be conducting his
Martian Revelation radio show
operations of the camera by remote computer control, and no one will be looking over his shoulder to decide or validate the commands he sends to his camera or to check on data coming in from the camera.
Surely no intelligent life could survive there.
He is going to have exclusive control of the data flow to and from
this UFO divers. Sidonia,
solar system scale
model,
without public accountability. But
Dick.
his contract
I'm NASA and you're not?
is a very interesting contract, we were told. We were informed gently
down through time
that
I'm NASA and you're not?
his contract is not subject to FOIA
the Faces on Mars
because he is a private contractor.
in a Masonic lodge. In 1993,
We can't even see the details.
Very interesting.
I mean, I was a NASA consultant, right?
Right.
I had to sign certain documents. For the first time on the air, an astronaut
Richard Hoagland,
admitted I had to sign certain documents. I mean, I was a NASA consultant. Fortunately, because I wasn't dealing with secret material, and I wasn't likely to come into contact with ruins on the imagery that I was dealing with, nothing personally was involved with, Leavenworth or sanctions if I should see something that I wasn't supposed to, and I would talk about it.
UFO divers.
Faces on Mars, mysterious pictures.
Oh, Jason,
Yes.
thank you for your call.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to
Let me
go...
finish one point,
Down through time
all right?
Yes.
The point is this. If Gary
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
really has been taking our data more seriously than he has been, giving out that he has,
religions and philosophies have been built and have fallen on the basis of the question, who am I?
For instance, the people working for NASA
I'm NASA and you're not?
have to sign documents, as Ed Mitchell admitted
when I did Art Bell one night, and I had a debate with Ed Mitchell. Remember that some years ago?
A while ago.
Ed Mitchell admitted that he had to sign security documents. For the first time on the air, an astronaut who was a member of the military admitted that when he went to the moon, he had to basically clear everything he talked about with people somewhere in government because there were certain things he could not say.
Right, there was
about
a
the
Santa
space
Claus.
program.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I was a NASA consultant, right?
UFO diaries.
We got them from Hoagland, we got them from NASA, and there you are. I mean, one of them's going to say, yeah, those are ours.
Which are our pictures.
I mean, I was a NASA consultant. I had to sign certain documents.
Well, what a surprise.
For the first time on the air, an astronaut
I'm NASA and you're not?
who was a member of
In a Masonic lodge.
he admitted I had to sign certain documents. I mean, I was a NASA consultant. Fortunately, because I wasn't dealing with secret material, and I wasn't likely to come into contact with ruins on the imagery that I was dealing with, nothing personally was involved with, Leavenworth or sanctions if I should see something that I wasn't supposed to, and I would talk about it.
UFO diaries.
Faces on Mars.
Mysterious pictures.
But there are stories of other people, such as Dr. Mitchell, that in fact he had to sign those documents as part of a security clearance. So you can imagine that they appeal to everyone who works at NASA's best side, meaning
I'm NASA and you're not?
and they also follow it up with legal sanctions, meaning if you do talk, we'll put you in jail. And between those two, the carrot and the stick, have been able to keep an effective cover-up
Down through time
on what's out there.
UFO diaries. Cydonia.
Sunset. Solar system scale.
Model.
In the region designated as Cydonia.
For decade after decade.
I'm NASA and you're not?
Now, how have the
EnterpriseMission.com.
scientists,
My old friend, the Mad Martian,
who are obviously not happy with this situation,
down through time.
how have they gotten around it?
Hey, Richard, how many have contacted you since then that want
I'm NASA and you're not?
to, come clean?
It's even better than that, Gary.
Oh.
Because a question that has been asked of me has been, well, hold on, look, if there's a
UFO diaries.
Faces on Mars.
cover-up going on, how come you guys have NASA images with artifacts on
UFO diaries.
to talk about?
Down through time.
If it was a real cover-up, there wouldn't be any pictures, right? Why are there pictures?
Why the pictures?
Yes.
Well, to give us the data, but at the same time...
So who's trying to give us the data despite the security oaths?
I'm NASA and you're not?
It has to come from the
UFO diaries.
project people, right?
Yes.
Grizzly Adams Productions.
The people involved in the mission.
EnterpriseMission.com.
Right.
I'm NASA and you're not?
Who are putting things out there
In a Masonic lodge. In 1993.
despite the documents they signed.
Well, what a surprise.
Here's the interesting paradox.
Down through time.
EnterpriseMission.com.
We have a cover-up, yes. For the first time on the air, an astronaut
A member of our team of intelligence.
who was a member
In a Masonic lodge.
he admitted, we have a cover-up, yes.
Well, what a surprise.
But the
UFO diaries.
cover-up
Down through time.
is incredibly leaky.
Well, what a surprise.
We're getting real images, real data, right? But everyone from
Chuck Selye, producer of the UFO Diaries.
on down.
Lee Shackelford.
Right.
Let me lay a scenario on you.
Down
Through time.
Okay.
You like them big hairy balls, don't you?
The law is very specific, okay?
Right.
The documents these guys sign basically say they can't talk about it.
Yeah, UFO Diaries.
Well, what a surprise.
They can't acknowledge
down through time.
the ruins are there.
UFO diaries. Cydonia.
Sunset. Solar system scale.
Model.
Well, what a surprise.
They can't lay out the science of the archaeology. They can't hold press conferences on ruins on Mars, right?
Right.
But apparently there's nothing in the documents that says they can't release the pictures.
And then have the public do it.
Down through time.
Well, what a surprise.
But in our culture, in America, in the 21st century, Gary,
right,
until there is an official NASA, I'm NASA and you're not,
EnterpriseMission.com,
UFO Diaries.
press conference, until some scientist,
my old friend the Mad Martian,
say, with the full weight and authority of the U.S. government behind them,
damn it, are you f***ing with me?
We have found ruins on Mars.
The fourth world, counting out from the sun.
In the region designated as Sidonia.
Down through time.
It doesn't matter how many pictures are put out there.
Martian Revelator.
Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
Nobody, except for a small minority that they don't care about, is actually going to believe.
my old friend the Mad Martian,
I'm saying that unless I'm NASA and you're not, came on TV, no one's going to believe.
my old friend the Mad Martian.
Well, what a surprise.
Oh, okay.
You know, if you and I sit here on the radio, on the internet, and talk about this,
UFO Diaries.
Cover-up controversy.
Down
through time.
With photographs on the web, just go to
www.com.
The Faces of Mars.
That's www.com.
The Faces of Mars.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't affect national policy or the national psyche. I mean, let's look at a current example from
Martian Revelation Radio Show.
current affairs right now, okay? In Brookings,
Mm-hmm.
there also is a provision for testing how resilient people ultimately would be by exposing them
down through time.
in the culture to the idea of
UFO Diaries.
Faces on Mars. Serious pictures.
and extraterrestrial civilizations and all that.
Well, we see how it is now.
So, if I'm right about this,
UFO Diaries. Sidonia.
Solar system scale.
Down through time.
you and I, for the last, me for 27 years and you for a little less, are part of an official
Faces on Mars.
exposure,
Down through time.
an acclimation program
UFO Diaries.
to get people used to the ideas.
The Faces on Mars.
Cover-up controversy.
Down
through time.
So when there is the official
EnterpriseMission.com.
I'm NASA and you're not.
announcement, they won't freak out a la Brookings.
Well, what a surprise.
And it raises a question,
down through time.
was
Dick.
a willing government agent
I'm NASA and you're not.
In a Masonic lodge.
as part of a Brookings experiment
Down through time.
to see how frightened and how frazzled and how hysterical people became at the idea of an invasion from Mars.
Right.
The fourth world, counting out from the sun. Surely no intelligent life could survive there.
Well, what a surprise.
The bottom line is, I believe, I obviously can't prove this yet, but I believe we're getting to the end of this acclimation period.
Down through time.
Well, what a surprise.
I think that your
Martian Revelation Radio Show.
activities and ours over the last 20-some years have been part, if, shall we say, unsupported. Because, again, why do we have these
UFO Diaries.
Faces on Mars.
photographs?
Down through time.
If we didn't have the photographs, Gary, we wouldn't have a thing to talk about. You and I would be sitting here and discussing the shape of Ichthyosaurus or something else.
Right.
We would not be talking about ruins on Mars.
The fourth world, counting out from the sun.
Exactly.
It's only because of people like
Dick.
Coogan. Think about this. What better way to put the real stuff out there than to have a guy
I'm NASA and you're not.
who says, over my dead body will I ever take a picture of
UFO Diaries.
Sidonia?
Down through time.
There's a huge gap between the words and the music, and follow the music, forget the words.
Right.
Forget that no one is saying officially,
The Other Side of Midnight.
oh my God, there's ruins. Photographs are there.
Down through time.
Go to www.com.
The Faces of Mars.
That's www.com.
The Faces of Mars.
For the first time on the air, an
Dick.
Coogan,
I'm NASA and you're not.
who was a member of
In a Masonic lodge.
he admitted photographs are there.
Well, what a surprise.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
While they give us so much, why isn't it still, even what we're seeing, a thing of national security? This is, again, just cheese. It's already under the control by black ops.
Well, how this all evolves
Down through time.
is anybody's guess.
Well, you see where I'm going now, right, Cap?
You know.
Well, what a surprise.
But remember, we're also getting to the limit of when we monopolize a scenario.
The Martian revelators
Are now developing vigorous, technically mature
Martian revelation radio show
space programs, and they are going to
this UFO diaries. Sidonia
Sunset. Solar system scale.
model down through time. Well, what a surprise.
So that's why it's a very dangerous thing, and it's not like the vision of Chuck Selye, producer of the UFO Diaries, I believe, was trying to portray of what the message is and
UFO diaries.
how we are to address this.
Extraordinary code
Of intelligence down through time. I mean, I've spent my life on world mysteries, so I'm willing to investigate this further and see what we can find.
The fourth world, counting out from the sun.
Well, what a surprise. All of the different predictions from just about every UFO diaries culture and try to make some sense of it and put it all together into an end-time scenario of what the picture is being painted that's going to happen.
Well, it's more closer bound to the scenario that I published in Monuments, where I talked about that the worst scenario would be if it was a race with each party, I'm NASA and you're not,
Mad Martian.
kind of in competition for the surprise at the end.
Well, what a surprise.
Can you imagine
some extraordinary code
Of intelligence down through time.
if we're looking
Down through time.
which I firmly believe we are tonight,
Well, what a surprise.
if we're looking at the remains of an ancient, incredibly high-tech, advanced civilization,
Definitely.
both on Mars,
UFO diaries. In the region designated as Sidonia.
can you imagine the advantage that would accrue to the nation or nations that gets there first and bring back hardware or documents or libraries or information or weapons or some kind of technology, which of course is the scenario that I was very concerned about back in the
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Solar system scale.
model
In a Masonic lodge in 1993.
when I was doing the first studies of these objects,
The faces on Mars.
and realizing that it would be really the worst scenario if this all happened in high competition,
Down through time.
Right.
which is why we did some very special things to provide
Mad Martian.
with data
Down through time. Well, what a surprise.
through one of the
UFO diaries.
presidential advisories.
Chuck Selye.
Damn it, are you f***ing with me?
And all of this is described in
Martian revelation radio show
Mysterious pictures.
television.
in great detail. It's called
UFO diaries.
Second Track Diplomacy.
Mad Martian.
Determined that we would not be blindsided
Down through time.
by I'm NASA and you're not, zipping off to Mars
UFO diaries. In the region designated as Sidonia.
in secret and suddenly announcing to the world
some extraordinary code
Of intelligence down through time.
well, you know, I'm NASA and you're not, so just call it quits.
This is what
Richard Hoagland
wrought.
Down
through time.
And he did it ostensibly under NASA, but it was begun under a Pentagon program, which is the most efficient in the eventual successes of NASA.
I'm NASA and you're not.
But it was a program initiated and begun under, again, a Pentagon program.
Well, what a surprise.
And of course, we've now seen how this all flows into the development of this amazing launch vehicle,
UFO diaries.
which was the spacecraft.
By something or someone near Mars
Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
that does not wish to be photographed.
Many years ago, I sent my old friend, the Mad Martian, on a kind of a mission into the archives of the
UFO diaries.
in
Sidonia.
there, and they have an incredible library. So I asked someone, my old friend, the Mad Martian,
Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
who had written to me in answer to
UFO diaries.
they would kind of go and do some research.
Yep.
And my old friend, the Mad Martian, came back with some really interesting information.
Down
through time.
Well, what a surprise.
I mean, I have been so misquoted even years later. I mean, when we're looking back at history and surviving documents, you know, decades, 20 years or whatever, the idea that we can actually discern the motivations.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because remember, if someone wants to suppress something,
I'm NASA and you're not.
they're not going to come out and say, this is why we want to suppress it. They're going to get, willing minions who, for their own greed, will service the idea of suppression.
Well, what a surprise.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But they won't tell us the truth about what they're doing because that would reveal the game.
Well, what a surprise.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Up against everything we're going to talk about tonight is the political backdrop that NASA has been concealing. I'm NASA and you're not. The real solar system, what it's really found. Against that backdrop, this
UFO divers. Sidonia.
Solar system scale.
model. I mean, switching gears, but not totally. Have you been following this George Zimmerman trial?
Of course.
And you know what the jury instruction is from the judge when for their deliberations? The judge basically says to a jury, if a witness has been found to deliberately lie about a significant piece of testimony, you are obliged to disregard all other testimony by that witness. You are aware that that's a legal, kind of mainstay of the American legal system, right?
Oh, man, but I've always wondered how a juror can merely disregard something once they've heard it.
Well, you can't unring the bell, as they say. So you have to take it into account, and then you put that piece of testimony with all the others, and then you weight it, basically appropriately, given that instruction that if the prosecution or defense proves that a witness has lied on some material point, not what color somebody's eyes are, or what the weather was that day, but something really important, then you are obliged to disregard their other testimony. Well, I apply this to NASA.
So when I say NASA, I want to be very clear.
I'm NASA and you're not. We have proven over and over and over again that NASA has lied to us. I'm NASA and you're not. About what's on its images, going back to the first images taken of the
UFO divers.
Faces on Mars from 1993.
Well, what a surprise. So if you apply that precept, I'm NASA and you're not, we have to be incredibly suspect
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and incredibly distrusting
Well, I'm suspicious.
of whatever NASA puts out as official imagery of anything.
Well, I'm suspicious.
So when I saw this image of the
UFO divers. Sidonia.
Solar system scale.
model alongside the real stuff,
The faces on Mars.
my first thought was, is somebody inside NASA playing games? I'm NASA and you're not? Placing, with
UFO divers.
this
Face on Mars.
little creature in one of its images so that all the anomaly hunters will glom onto that.
Fourth world, counting out from the sun.
Down through time.
And then, of course, because it's nuts on the surface,
Surely no intelligent life could survive there.
they use that to credit all the other real stuff in the images that other folks inside NASA, I'm NASA and you're not, who are trying to leak what the
Mad Martian
really is finding.
Some extraordinary code
Of intelligence
Down through time.
are putting on the official website.
The other side of midnight.
.com. This is four-dimensional chess. Nothing is linear. Nothing can be assumed. And we have such short memories in this culture
Down through time.
that no one remembers that
UFO divers.
was designed with the primitive computer tools back then,
In 1993.
in the dark ages of the pre-internet.
In a Masonic lodge.
So the idea that
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
has shown us something that we didn't know, or more appropriately, that we should have remembered,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
is a little bit short-sighted on the part of all the rest of us, because this has been doing this to all of us for decades. Well, what a surprise.
Do you think it would be a joke for
Mad Martian
to Photoshop the rodent and pop it into a
UFO divers.
picture?
Well, no, it wouldn't be a joke. It would be a way to
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
discredit folks like me who come on Coast tonight. I'm NASA and you're not? And are going to discuss the real anomaly.
some extraordinary code
of intelligence
down
through time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The real artifacts, the structures,
The faces of Mars.
the evidence of machinery, of broken tools, of construction, of walls,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
great wall of darkness, of geometric, linkages.
in a Masonic lodge.
All that stuff gets lumped into the same category
Down through time.
because if you can discredit, again, like the witness, I'm NASA and you're not, the person telling you the story with one piece of later demonstrably false information.
And I have the awful feeling that Gary has been turned into a kind of misguided missile by the dark side, by the bad guys, in an effort to basically throw more spaghetti on the wall. And so I view Gary as someone who is predisposed to be susceptible to influences where he becomes a disinfo agent by the dark side, by the bad guys.
George, I'm not going to talk to this person. He's threatened my life. I'm not going to talk to him on the air.
All right, you got that right. He's threatened your life?
Yep. In public, in writing.
You got to be kidding me.
No, I'm not. You need to get more down in the weeds and look at some of the weird stuff going on behind the scenes around us.
I will respect your decision, Mr. Hoagland. Absolutely. My gosh. Reno, Nevada.
This is someone who is mentally ill, who I think is being used as a misguided missile
By the dark side, by the bad guys.
to get at our work and our research.
Down
through time.
And he needs help. He does not need to be on national media being used by God knows what corporations to further their ratings.
Unbelievable. Well, you're only allowed to get on once every month anyways. He said he was on last week.
He was on last week, yes.
How long has this been? Well, that's up to you.
Years.
Years. Okay.
Years.
You know, I get some of those.
Yeah, you had stalkers. Well, we've got this guy, and he's threatened to carve my heart out with a knife, blow me away with a 45.
Oh, nice.
Really nice.
You got the law on this one?
I've got him being watched.
All right.
Well, what a surprise.
Good for you.
The good news is, by Gary doing what he's doing, he's forcing more people to ask deeper and better questions like you, allowing me the opportunity to set the record straight.
Because if you can discredit, again, like the witness,
Dick
Hoagland, the person telling you the story, I'm NASA and you're not, with one piece of later demonstrably false information, then you can discredit their entire story.
Down through time.
Oh, have we lost you, Richard? Yep, we sure have. Or talk about being discredited, they have clipped you off again.
Down through time.
I don't think they want people to relate and to associate and to connect and to expand their awareness and their vision and their consciousness.
Well, what a surprise.
Which, of course, is why these materials have been prescribed a joint and force them to smoke at least half of it.
And I realized at that point that this is a no-win scenario. This is the Kobayashi Maru. You'll never, it's like the tar baby. You'll never get out of being dependent on official agencies.
The other side of midnight.
To tell you the truth.
No, they won't tell you.
Like they're expecting Big Daddy
Dick
Hoagland to sit down in front of a TV camera and tell
the other side of midnight.
The facts of life. I hate to say it, but
the other side of midnight.
The community is stuck. They're stuck on a model where Big Daddy
Dick
Hoagland tells you the truth. Oh, you can't believe it.
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
That's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
Until Big Daddy
Dick
Hoagland tells you the truth.
So anyway, this guy, my old friend, the Mad Martian, was telling me tonight, because he watched the other side of midnight debate, to basically finally get the data that will support or not support this model that I'm putting out, that the real reason that marijuana and other substances of similar ilk have been banned is to prevent us from connecting to our higher selves, if you want to use that term. So we're on a trip. Remember Arts Want to Take a Ride? We're on a ride to some extraordinarily interesting new territory. And in Colorado, the night of the other side of midnight debate, as this friend of mine, my old friend, the Mad Martian, said, wouldn't it have been cool? You could grow a plant, harvest it, grow another, in other words, a recyclable resource on a much shorter time scale and a much better product when you could just grow your way into whatever you wanted to use it for. You understand that we're all going to be smoking marijuana because the dam has been broken. They can't stuff the genie back in the bottle. How many other cliches can I bring up on this tonight? That would have opened up such conversation, such stream of consciousness, such amazing, whatever we would have seen.
Some extraordinary code
of intelligence
down through time.
Okay, mystery caller from Area 719. Who are you and where are you calling from?
Amazing things you're saying. Colorado, my man. And I got to tell you, you're right on the mark, not just about the marijuana and the consciousness and everything else you said.
Some extraordinary code
of intelligence
down through time. But everything else before that, and what the caller just said about this.
Faces on Mars.
Cover-up controversy.
Down through time. I got an offer for you, Richard. $1,000 to show your proof about me, Mad Martian, about what you claimed about me, or let me on the air for 1 hour. $1,000.
Gary.
$1,000, my friend.
We are not relitigating this because it's not true.
Yeah, it's not going away, Richard. There's still a mystery, and there's more facts that I have found.
Okay. The number is 505-786-8802.
Well, when you're going through the past and you're trying to piece together things, and a good historian should never say, this is this and this is fact, unless they got copious amounts of primary sources to back it up. I like to say that historians are sort of like seers or prophets in a way in reverse, where we look at, if history is written by the winner, the loser has an anecdote in there somewhere, and surely you can find both sides of things in terms of documents or he said, she said, and you always look at both sides, and somewhere in there is the truth.
Yeah,
and when it comes, and you can find a lot of material about that, just for the sake of brevity of the argument.
Okay, so your position is, based on your own research, I presume,
yes,
that the banning of my old friend the Mad Martian was basically for economic reasons, period. Please,
yes,
somebody mute your mic. Gosh, don't do that on the air.
All of the sort of like the reefer madness, quote-unquote, shockumentary of the UFO diaries and all of that, if you take a look at the paper trail, and this is the best part, when it comes to history, especially modern history, some things that you can't hide, no matter how rich you are, is the money trail on certain things, like trying to ban it.
Mad Martian.
The paper trail will eventually lead to what you will find to be the holders of major
faces on Mars.
Mysterious pictures.
I'm NASA and you're not?
Well, the
Mad Martian.
They know how to diversify their portfolio, obviously.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The reason why it might continue might have something to do with what you're saying. But as to the origins of why it
Mad Martian
was banned, no, it was all about money.
But this is really cool because it's got lots of hidden stuff in the artwork that you can all have fun figuring out and decoding.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Why do you need TV when it's one image you can focus on and really kind of savor and take in? And this image requires savoring and taking in because what we're looking at. But whoever did this
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Solar system scale
model
did it a long, long time ago.
In 1993.
NASA sneaks this out
in a Masonic lodge
onto the official
UFO diaries. In the region designated as Sidonia.
Mm-hmm. Obviously daring us to find it
down through time.
And then to talk about it. When you see a movie
UFO diaries. In the region designated as Sidonia.
Projected from 35 millimeter on a screen, HD can't match it. Film is king. The classic.
UFO diaries. In the region designated as Sidonia.
Filmed 20 years before
in a Masonic lodge.
And it was a private enterprise, like that term, expedition.
Down
through time.
by a bunch of industrialists.
In a Masonic lodge in 1993.
Government wasn't part of it.
You might wonder why, if you see this film,
UFO divers. In the region designated as Sidonia,
Woody Woodpecker shows up
Down through time,
explaining the science behind the rocketry.
Oh.
Guess who?
So there's your story. It's a wonderful documentary. Followed by The Faces of Dr. Hoagland. No one in this small western town,
The Other Side of Midnight,
can understand what they're seeing with these great mysteries brought by.
Mad Martian.
Down through time.
Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
Brought by Dr.
Hoagland in a Masonic lodge in 1993.
So
This is it. This is the beginning, I believe, of that fabled D word, disclosure. Exactly the way I've always said it should happen.
Yep.
Which is you start with ruins, you start with an ancient technology and civilization, 20 years separated in time,
Yep.
in your backyard to get folks used to the idea, because ruins don't hold ray guns and they don't invade planets and whatever. And then you move up the scale to all the other stuff that they've been hiding for over 20 years, because obviously you will have pithy comments between the lines.
I'm NASA and you're not?
Every time I see a film like that,
UFO divers. In the region designated as Sidonia,
I say to myself, what about the poor camera guys?
well, yeah. I mean,
It's all, you're seeing a point of view with a camera, but there's a guy behind the camera hanging on for dear life during the avalanches and crossing the crevices, and that's what this technology lets us do.
Yep.
The fascination of the Faces on Mars for me, and in my fascination with Richard Hoagland, who's been the big mover and shaker in all of that.
And I think the timing of this
Martian Revelation radio show.
film festival, my old friend the Mad Martian, who is one of my all-time greats in terms of laying out what we could have seen decades ago if the officialdom had been honest with us.
I'm NASA and you're not?
Yep.
The juxtaposition of that
Martian Revelation radio show.
Mysterious pictures.
Television.
and what NASA's now begun.
They may appear somewhat primitive by today's standards. They would naturally, but you have to just put yourself in the frame of mind of the people the audience is seeing.
Martian Revelation radio show.
Then realizing this was the state of the art. It was the most incredible manipulation of reality that you could see on the screen.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So we're at the right time, at the right place to start history again.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you're kicking it off, my old friend, the Mad Martian, because next week it's going to go nuts if what we're seeing on these images is commented on by anybody at the official level at some point. Okay, that was my friend and colleague, my old friend, the Mad Martian.
Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
And we've done all kinds of intriguing projects. Some night we'll come on the air and we'll talk about the scripts that we've written
down through time
around this investigation on the
UFO divers,
monuments of Mars,
in the region designated as Sidonia,
etc. So I discovered in my life, in my work, that all kinds of things are connected below the surface that appear to be separate up top.
Well, what a surprise.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So surf's up now.
Gary.
And with surf being up, all kinds of things are possible.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So discoveries that would have been ignored 20, 30 years ago, it's now time to integrate them into what's coming.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The big picture, who the heck we really are.
I'm NASA and you're not?
And so I think that's what this discovery is really trying to tell us, that, we've known about this a long time. But,
well, what a surprise.
But now is the time to tell and show you.
Well, what a surprise.
All kinds of interesting backstory about the mission and how they're taking images and what they think this stuff is. And, of course,
I'm NASA and you're not?
Totally out to lunch. They haven't a clue in public what this is.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
but they put the image out there
In 1993 in a Masonic lodge.
so we can have fun looking at what it is.
Down
through time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to put all this together.
Down
through time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If we actually get official grudging acknowledgement somewhere in the next few weeks that this
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
Solar system scale.
Model.
is in fact what it obviously has now to be.
Some extraordinary code
of intelligence.
Down
through time.
Not a natural phenomenon, but architecture in ancient ruin and decay. Yeah, UFO diaries. We will turn a page, and the future is going to be unlimited in terms of what can happen. Unlimited. It raised the hair on the back of my neck when I first heard it, so I wanted everybody else to hear, this is the guy, my old friend, the Mad Martian.
Gary, that's his real name, Gary Leggiere.
Who's doing the kind of research the rest of us can only hope to.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to the stuff, about the stuff that's hidden in our, right in front of us. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty darn amazing. It's a pretty compelling film. It's not just a hack film.
Okay.
It's something that I think both of you guys would really like to see.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
My job is to kind of like be the orchestra guy, the band leader, where everything kind of comes out and things that are unclear become clearer because we weave the threads.
Down
through time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I'm trying to do.
Down
through time.
So maybe NASA is now beginning to realize it has to begin to tell us the truth.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because someday somebody else is going to.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then they will look really, really, really bad.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because in an era where there is a changing physics, so more people are conscious, more people are looking around and saying, what the hell am I doing? Why is that happening? That doesn't make sense. We need to change that. When that is a general societal occurrence, it means you can no longer keep secrets. In that era, the only way you can keep secrets is to try to confuse people, to just screw things up so that no one knows who to trust. And so I view Gary as someone who is predisposed to be susceptible to influences where he becomes a disinfo agent to basically screw up data that we're trying to present in a logical, coherent, scientific fashion where you can hang on to it and validate that this part is true, this part is true, this part is true. Okay, then this part could be true. Remember, the only things that I say are absolutely real is the data on Mars and the Moon, evidence of ancient structures, and the physics. The politics, who did what to whom, what the timelines are, what may be happening day after tomorrow, what's going on in Washington.
Damn it, are you f***ing with me?
It's all a set of scenarios prescinding from this database that I've spent 30 plus years trying to figure out.
I think that this is part of a large change of the physics, the background under which we live.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Kind of invisible. It modulates our lives, and we're not aware of it until these things kind of happen.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
After that, okay, I don't normally take out after people. If you've noticed over the last several decades, I don't say bad things about most people. In fact, extraordinarily rarely do I come out and call a certain individual by name in certain ways that do not seem to accord with our objective, which is to figure out what the hell is going on and get at the truth. When this phenomenon first surfaced, it was so obvious to me, based on information that I don't really have time to go into. I mean, I could, but it would take too much time. That it was obvious to me that this new wave of, shall we say, reportage was part of a very sophisticated campaign to do what I just described. In an era of rising physics and rising consciousness, where even the mainstream is commenting on certain phenomena that they can't understand why people are changing their minds so rapidly. And they keep commenting over and over again. This is happening at an incredible pace, and you're seeing politicians every day step to a microphone and suddenly change their position. In that era, you really can't keep secrets much longer. So the only defense mechanism of the bad guys, the controllers, the ones that want to keep us down on the farm,
I'm NASA and you're not?
is to spread confusion and dissension and information that can't be checked, but comes with an exquisite, believable storyline, which in a way is a kind of a metaphysical test. It's like, where is your internal discernment? What do you resonate with? What do you feel is the truth as opposed to what at the moment you can actually prove? In view of the data we have looked at,
the faces on Mars,
Cover-up controversy.
down through time,
and the fact that we really shouldn't have this data at all. We should have, if the control of the real solar system and our real heritage and who we really are was 100% absolute, we wouldn't even be having this conference. We didn't know anything was wrong. There is so much free will going on. So again, the fact of this phenomenology suddenly springing up about a couple of years ago, to me, is an indicator that we're winning.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The other side of midnight is getting so desperate to try to maintain control.
I'm NASA and you're not?
That their last avenue of control is to confuse people, so the folks that are trying to do things,
My old friend, the Mad Martian,
are viewed with suspicion and fear as opposed to an open, okay, let's see where this goes. Fear is the mechanism.
You're a pussy!
So I view this area,
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
solar system scale,
Model.
particularly the involvement of certain very visible high-level political persons,
Damn it, are you f***ing with me?
as a mechanism of distraction from the agenda of where we seem in resonance with this wave, this surfs up physics, which we're all riding toward a extraordinarily different future, if I read the numbers correct.
The planet Mars is next to our own, the fourth world counting out from the sun.
And it's almost, again, sad that this is happening because it's not going to work. It's not going to distract us very long. It doesn't need to have names attached to it. It will fall by the wayside, and the reality of the extraordinary past and future we once had and can have again will come to the fore.
And what seems to be occurring, at least from my analysis, is the good are getting better and the bad are getting worse. And then they're going to measure the reaction. How many people actually take us seriously? How many people freak out? How many people go, oh my God, oh my God. You know, who is this dick? Really? You know, who is this
Mad Martian?
Really?
Hopefully that some one of us or ones of us will see.
The code.
down through time.
And we're now just rediscovering our heritage.
The great mystery at this point seems to be if the Enterprise mission and its colleagues can find all this and so much more, then why can't NASA? Or is there something more? Is it possible that they have seen what we have seen and also understand what's really there,
UFO diaries. In a region designated as Sidonia.
but have a reason to keep silent?
Is this face just a natural formation? Or was it constructed by some long-lost civilization?
The face is telling us that we may not quite be who we think we are, that we may be something more. And at this crucial point in geopolitical history, it seems appropriate that we could have the means to find out if that intimation is true.
You know, a lot of people will think that your conspiracy theories down through time make you stark raving mad.
Well, I'm suspicious.
Why? He says to stop further investigation into mysterious pictures. Mr. Hogan says they are evidence of intelligent life.
Okay, the message of the face is that we should examine the
UFO diaries.
monuments of Mars. If we examine the monuments of Mars,
UFO diaries. In a region designated as Sidonia.
amazing things could come true.
Down through time.
Not the least of which
is that we will find that there has been a long lineal connection with
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
a connection which may, in fact, portend an interesting future for the Earth. It is in our hands
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
to find out. It is in our hands to look at our destiny right in the face.
The point is this. If Gary,
The Martian Revelator,
really has been taking our data more seriously than he has been, giving out that he has, he is in a beautiful position
Down through time.
to quietly take pictures, to put them together as books, videos, film, whatever, in that
Martian
Revelation radio show down through time.
and suddenly come out and blow all of the independent investigators out of the water. Because obviously in the marketplace of ideas and in the marketplace of
The Faces on Mars.
photographs, if he publishes his own book
The Faces on Mars.
validating the
UFO diaries. Sidonia.
monuments of Mars, then everybody's going to gravitate to Gary
My old friend, the Mad Martian.
and his
Martian
Revelation radio show
his perception and his theories as to what he is seeing.
down through time.
Well, this is certainly, Dick, one of the odd characteristics of this overall case.
But I do think this remarkable video sequence is evidence of a different kind of battle inside NASA.
So when I say NASA, I want to be very clear.
I'm NASA and you're not?
Why did we get to see what we have seen? Our explanation is that someone very highly placed inside the agency
I'm NASA and you're not?
wanted us to see this sequence.
The planet Mars is next to our own, the fourth world counting out from the sun, barren, perpetually cold, and with a thin atmosphere.
We are the paradoxical ape, bipedal, naked, large-brained, long the master of fire, tools, and language, but still trying to understand ourselves, aware that death is inevitable, yet filled with optimism. We grow up slowly. We hand down knowledge. We empathize and deceive. We shape the future from our shared understanding of the past. Carta brings together experts from diverse disciplines to exchange insights on who we are and how we got here. An exploration made possible by the generosity of humans like you.
I'm really delighted to be here and kind of kick things off by talking about the evolution of human walking and human running. And so let's get going. So it's important to recognize that, all animals engage in physical activity, which we define as any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles that expends energy. But only humans exercise, which I define as discretionary physical activity, which we undertake to sustain or improve health and fitness. And of all the major kinds of exercise that we do, and on the major kinds of physical activity that we do, nothing is more common than walking and running. But to understand that, we really need to step back a little bit. It's important, if we think about both physical activity and exercise, which of course is a kind of physical activity, it's important to back up and think about that in the context of what animals do all day long, and that involves also physical inactivity. And humans, it must be understood, evolved from relatively inactive creatures. And a simple way of thinking about that is something called the physical activity level, or the PAL. The PAL is just the ratio of the total energy expended in a day, your total energy expenditure, divided by your basal metabolic rate. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about this from Herman Ponzer. But most animals have PALs of about 2 to 3. In other words, they're about 2 to 3 times more active than there are sort of just kind of the energy they spend sort of sitting around. But apes are basically couch potatoes. So orangs, gorillas, chimpanzees, they have PALs of about 1.4 or 1.5. And that's a huge reduction compared to most animals. And like one way of thinking about that is just even your average sedentary American spends way more energy just per calorie per kilo than wild chimpanzees on being active. I'm sorry to make fun of Senator Sanders. He's actually one of my favorite people. But anyway, so selection but what happened in human evolution was that there was selection for increased physical activity. So remember, PALs of apes are about 1.4 or 1.5. PALs for hunter-gatherers are around 2. And so that represents a really substantial increase. And that's because hunter-gatherers engage in digging and carrying and throwing and dancing and climbing and fighting and all kinds of stuff, but especially they engage in walking and running. So if you look at the average amount of walking distance per day that chimpanzees do, it's about 2 to 4 kilometers in most groups and most times. Whereas your average female hunter-gatherer in the tropics walks about 8 to 9 kilometers a day, and the average male hunter-gatherer walks about 12 to 15 kilometers a day. Another way of putting that is that your average female hunter-gatherer walks from LA to DC every year, throughout her life. So walking and running are really the most fundamental forms of both moderate and vigorous physical activity that we humans have been undertaking for millions of years. And just to understand that, we often define moderate and vigorous physical activity based on what's called your metabolic rate, which is just the ratio of how much energy you're spending to how much energy you'd be spending at rest. So moderate physical activities are usually about 3 to 6 times more sort of energetically costly than resting. So a brisk walk, for example, would be moderate physical activity. And vigorous physical activities are greater than 6 METs, or 6 times the energy you spend in walking. And of course, running is of course the most fundamental form of vigorous physical activity. So with that kind of brief introduction, let's think about the evolution of human walking and running and why they still matter. So it's not an insight. Everybody here probably already knows that bipedalism is, of course, one of the major things that happened in human evolution. And in fact, it was bipedal walking, not big brains, that really led the way in human evolution, that got us started on a separate evolutionary path than our ape ancestors. So we evolved from a last common ancestor with chimpanzees, and both chimpanzees and gorillas are knuckle walkers. So by the principle of parsimony, it's reasonable to hypothesize that the last common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees was probably a knuckle walker, although that's still debated. And at some point, probably very soon after that last common ancestor, we became bipeds. And we have a lot of evidence for that, actually, despite a very poor fossil record. So this is the skull of Sahelanthropus, also sometimes known as Tumai. It's about 7 million years old, from Chad. And although there's a really bad femur from this guy, we do have the full skull, and this skull was unquestionably that of a biped because its foramen magnum pointed downwards. And of course, animals look where they're going when they're walking, and so a downwardly pointed foramen magnum is telltale evidence of some kind of bipedal gait. We also have a femur from a species called Auroran from Kenya from around 6 million years ago. And of course, there's the famous RD skeleton, which has a reasonably complete pelvis, and that pelvis is unquestionably the pelvis of a biped. So we know that early on in human evolution, walking bipedal walking led the way. And there are, of course, lots of debates about why early hominins started walking. But I think the very best explanations have to do with climate change. And we know this is a graph of tree cover density over both West and East Africa over the time period when when early hominins evolved. And we know that between about 7 and 6 million years ago, there was a brief phase of intense aridity that swept across Africa. And of course, that would have had been very important for a kind of ape ancestor of ours, because apes live in forests, they subsist on fruits. And as aridity increased, the distance that apes would have had to travel in order to get to patches of food would have increased. And it turns out that knuckle walking is really very expensive, and bipedalism is about twice as efficient per kilo, per unit distance, as knuckle walking. So a chimpanzee walking 4 kilometers a day spends about 100 kilos, whereas a bipedal hominin weighing the same amount would spend about 100 calories to walk about 8 kilometers. So that would have been a substantial energetic savings by becoming bipedal. And bipedalism, of course, seems like a reasonably complicated gait, and it's not something that most animals do. But we know that there are a number of key adaptations that underlie our ability to be good bipedal walkers. I already mentioned that the downward-oriented foramen magnum, but there's some other key ones as well. For example, a long curved lumbar spine, hips, the ilia of the hips that face to the side, a wide sacrum, an enlarged femoral head, reinforced knees, and a transverse arch, so an arch that goes from side to side of the foot that helps stiffen the foot when we push off during locomotion. So we know that these early hominins were bipedal, but there's still a lot of debates about just what early hominin walking was like. And there's been a substantial debate about whether or not they were sort of bent hip, bent knee, walking a bit like Groucho Marx, or whether they walked like your typical human today with an extended posture. And a common way we do that is to do what's called functional morphology. So we'll look at a region of the skeleton, like a foot, for example, and we'll ask, is that foot more chimp-like or is it more human-like? And if it's more chimp-like, we'll often assume that means it probably had an inefficient bent hip, bent knee gait. And if it's more human-like, we'll make the inference that it had an efficient extended hip and knee gait, like a typical modern human. I actually think that's a very poor way of doing science, because it's just correlational. It's not really testing mechanisms. And a better approach is to test the effects of variations in anatomy on performance. And I don't have time to go through too many examples, but let's give you one example here, which is, for example, long toes. So it's often argued that the long toes of Australopiths and perhaps Ardipithecus as well would have compromised its ability to walk, but that's actually a testable hypothesis. The reason is that long toes create a moment, a torque, a rotational moment around the joint between the metatarsals and the phalanges. That's the product of the force of the ground times the moment arm of that force, and that has to be countered by the flexor force that's produced by the muscles times its very, very tiny moment arm, because the muscles run right close to the joint. So Campbell Rolian, who was in my lab, did a wonderful experiment where he looked at people with longer and shorter toes and measured just what that flexor force was to stabilize the joint for people who had longer versus shorter toes, and then extended that graph up to what an Australopith would be like. And basically what Campbell found was that in terms of walking, having Australopith-like toes would not have been a problem, but in terms of running, it would have been a serious problem, because the amount of force that these digital flexors would have to produce was much greater than even the flexors that flex the big toe, and so that seems almost completely improbable. And so what we think is that the long toes of Australopithecus afarensis wouldn't have really affected its walking performance, but it certainly would have affected its running performance. Another example is the longitudinal arch. So it's well known that humans have arches and that other animals don't have arches, like chimpanzees, and it's often been argued that the longitudinal arch is a key adaptation for walking. And we should be a little bit suspicious about that, because of course there are a lot of human beings around today. Probably about a third of the people watching this conference don't actually have a full arch in their foot, and they can walk around. And it turns out that chimpanzees also walk, and they create stiffness, but not through their arch, but they create stiffness by using muscles, because muscles can stiffen the midfoot. And Nikolauka, also former member of the lab, did this kind of research, and we did some further experiments. But yes, it's true that the longitudinal arch makes the arch of the foot, the midfoot, much stiffer in humans than chimpanzees, about 4 times more stiff. But the muscles of chimpanzees can still stiffen their feet about 8 times more than, say, macaques can do it. So you don't actually need a longitudinal arch to stiffen the midfoot for propulsion. And so I don't think we should say the absence of a longitudinal arch in early Australopithecines meant that they couldn't walk like you or I. So a better way of doing it is to just basically tally up all these different adaptations, the lordosis, the ilia, the angle, etc., and look at the earliest hominins and look at Australopiths and ask what's their effect on walking performance. And I think when we look at the earliest hominins, the answer is a lot of question marks. I think there's some evidence. They certainly had a lateral-facing ilia. They certainly had a transverse arch. We have questions about a lot of other bits of anatomy, and there are other bits that they're just missing. But Australopiths certainly have quite a few features, I think, that would have made them effective at walking, and I think we can't discount the fact that their walking abilities would have been equal to that of humans. And in fact, the smoking gun evidence really comes from those famous Laetoli footprints, and a very neat analysis that Dave Reichland did, and he's also speaking at this conference, where they looked at the effect of different kinds of walking gaits on the footprints that people leave. And when you walk with an extended hip and knee, you basically, the heel print and the toe print are about of equal depth, but when you walk with a bent hip, bent knee, you leave a much deeper toe print. And if you look at the Laetoli prints, they look very much like a modern human with an extended hip and knee. And I think that's good evidence, very convincing evidence that these hominins, presumably Australopithecus, walked with an extended gait like you and me. And that's great, because walking is cool. It frees up our hands. There's all kinds of wonderful things about walking that we think is really amazing and important and helps create all kinds of opportunities in human evolution. But let's also remember that walking has some drawbacks, right? When you walk on 2 feet, you're less stable. You're more likely to fall over. It's a real problem if you're a pregnant mother, because now you have this enormous weight in front of you that makes you want to tip over all the time. It puts a lot of stress on your back, and walking may lead to increases in back pain. And of course, another really big problem with walking, which we don't talk about very often, is that it makes us slow. If you have only 2 legs, you can produce force, and generate power with only 2 legs as opposed to 4 legs. And that makes us, by definition, about half the speed of similar-sized quadrupeds. And so somebody like Usain Bolt, who's the world's fastest sprinter, he can run about 37 kilometers per hour. And that's way less fast than, a typical lion that can run about 80 kilometers per hour. And of course, very few of us can run as fast as Usain Bolt. Most, fit, reasonably good fit human beings can run only about 24 kilometers per hour. So we would have been, easy pickings for carnivores back in the day as a result of our being bipedal. So that would have been a very, very serious problem. And so a reasonable hypothesis is that because we were slow bipedal walkers, we had to find other ways to avoid being eaten by predators. And one hypothesis that I put forward, and you'll hear more about it from Yana Kambarov, is that although we think about hair loss and the increase in sweat glands as being crucial for running, maybe it was actually really important for walking, because hominids foraging out in the midday sun would have had an advantage because they could lose heat, dump heat more effectively than carnivores who could have chased them. So maybe the ability to forage in the middle of the day when it's really hot by sweating and having not so much fur was a really important advantage for being bipedal. Time will tell as we test just when we lost our hair and when we increased our sweat glands. Okay, that's it for walking. Now let's switch now to the other gait, which is running. And for many years, in fact, when I was a student, we pretty much discounted running as being an important gait in human evolution. In fact, I remember my professor, Dick Taylor, here shown here with Aria, telling me that I read Dave Carrier's paper back in the day, and I remember him telling me it was silly paper because humans are as inefficient as penguins, and we're awkward. And as we've already learned, even the fastest human beings are slow compared to most animals. And so, a typical human being can run a little bit faster than a skunk, but would be, in a close heat with a hippo or a rhino, and that's not very impressive, right? But things started to change because of, first of all, 2 pioneer papers published in 1984, one by Dave Carrier, who you're going to hear from a little later on, but also another one by Walter Bortz from Stanford Medical School, making the claim that running was really important in human evolution. And Dennis Bramble and I sort of picked up on this and expanded the argument in our paper in 2004 in Nature, where we argued that endurance running played a really important role in the evolution of the genus Homo. And to understand the importance of running, you need to understand that running is not just fast walking. So when you walk, you're using your legs basically like a stilt, like a pendulum. And during the first half of stance, you raise your body's center of mass that stores up kinetic energy, potential energy, and then during the second half of stance, your center of mass falls, and you get that kinetic energy back, that potential energy back for free, as potential energy back for free as kinetic energy. So you're kind of storing and releasing kinetic and potential energy. But running, you use your legs like a spring. It's like a pogo stick, right? And running, when you hit the ground, instead of your center of mass going up, it actually goes down. and you flex your hips and your knees and your ankles, and you're stretching elastic elements in your legs, those tendons, and they store up energy like a spring, and then they help push your body back up into the air for the aerial phase that occurs in a run that doesn't occur in a walk. So running is biomechanically really profoundly different from walking. And humans are really good at running, because running is basically jumping from one leg to another, and we are amazing jumpers. So here's to prove that to you, here's a graph of speed against speed for different species, so humans, dogs, ponies, and horses. And it's important to recognize that trotting is the endurance gait for quadrupeds. And human beings, even sort of, this is the human endurance running range, and even average middle-aged professors like me can run above the trot-gallop transition speed of a full-size dog, my size, and as well as a pony. And good human runners can run above the trot-gallop transition speed of horses. And that's not discounting, that's not even taking into consideration the thermoregulatory abilities of humans. That's just the speed at which humans can run long distances like marathons. Humans are also capable of running extraordinarily long distances. So, like millions of people every year run marathons, and yet most animals, including the social carnivores like hyenas and horses animals like horses, which have been bred for running, they can't and don't run for very long distances. They run about 15 to 20 kilometers. And of course, we're apes, right? And other apes barely run at all. So chimpanzees will run maybe about 100 meters. That's pretty much the maximum. And finally, in terms of economy, humans are fantastic. This is a graph of body mass against the cost of running. And you can see as bigger animals are more efficient, but humans land pretty much right along the lines. And we're about as efficient as horses and as ostriches and various antelopes. We're really very efficient runners, not what I was told by my professor back in the day. And to prove it, I actually a few years ago ran one of those races where you can run against horses, run a marathon against horses. And even though I'm a kind of an average runner, an average marathoner, I actually beat most of the horses in that race. So that was kind of cool. So I was able to put my money where my mouth is. And the reason I was able to do that, and the reason that average everyday humans can have these extraordinary running abilities, is that there's an enormous number of adaptations that have been identified that enable humans to be really good runners. And that's evidence for considerable selection. And so there's a wide range of these. A lot of these, of course, are musculoskeletal, but there's also cardiovascular and respiratory mechanisms. There are digestive ones and thermoregulatory ones and metabolic ones as well. And you'll hear more about the metabolic adaptations from Ellen, and you'll hear more about the thermoregulatory adaptations from Yana Kambarov. But let me just very briefly touch on some of these other adaptations. So my lab has spent a lot of time studying musculoskeletal adaptations for running, and I don't have time to go through most of them, and you probably not want to listen to such a long lecture anyway. But as I already mentioned, short toes, for example, that's one of them. An enlarged gluteus maximus is also known. You're probably all sitting on it, but humans have an enlarged gluteus maximus, and it turns out this muscle plays very little role in walking, but it's really important for stabilizing the trunk in running, and we can show that humans, in fact, once with the genus Homo, there's been an extraordinary increase in the size of this muscle, especially the cranial portion, which is a trunk stabilizer. Humans also have an IT band, a source of a lot of injury, but the IT band is convergently involved with animals like goats and sheep, and Carolyn Angwin in my lab showed that IT bands are also an important adaptation because they're an elastic storage device that stores up energy during stance and helps passively swing the leg during the swing phase, and saving actually a considerable amount of energy. We also have remember, running is basically jumping from one leg to the other, and we have all these tendons that are really important storage organs for elastic energy. So chimpanzees and gorillas, for example, have tiny little tendons. That's the length of Achilles tendon in a gorilla, but in humans it's more than half the length of the shank, and we have all these other tendons in the IT band. Again, these are important elastic energy storage devices. And we also have elastic energy storage devices in our feet. So some people think about the longitudinal arch as being a key adaptation for walking, but I actually think it's really more an adaptation for running. Again, you can walk without a longitudinal arch, but it's really hard to run without one. And that plantar fascia and those tendons in the foot, turns out, save a fair amount of energy that we recover with each step. And then finally, just want to mention the nuchal ligament, because we just published a paper, Andrew Yagian in my lab is the first author, where we showed that the arm acts as a counterbalance to the head via this fantastic little elastic organ, this elastic tendon in the back of the neck called the nuchal ligament, which helps link the mass of the arm with the mass of the head, thereby providing passive form of stabilization of the head for when we're running. But there's a lot more adaptations than just musculoskeletal. Let me just mention some key cardiovascular adaptations, because of course when you run, you need to do any other kind of sustained physical activity. You need a high cardiac output, and that's the amount of blood that you can circulate throughout your body. And humans do that in part because we have very different hearts from chimpanzees. We have ventricles. That's the main pumping chamber of the heart. The left ventricle, which pumps blood throughout the body, in humans is larger, and it's thinner, and it's less trabeculated, and importantly, it also has the ability to twist and untwist like a spring during running. So this is a graph done with a collaboration with my colleagues and friends Aaron Bagish and Rob Shave. But this is a chimpanzee in red, and these are different kinds of humans. This is a runner, and this is a football player in blue and green. But during systole, which is the pumping phase, the human heart twists, and then during diastole, which is the filling phase, it then untwists. Whereas the chimpanzee, basically, the heart is unable to twist and untwist, and thereby loses that elastic capability. And so humans, like human runners, can have way larger cardiac outputs when standardized, so liters per minute standardized by body mass, than chimpanzees and gorillas. And even humans that don't have really big endurance-adapted hearts, like football linemen, still have way more ability to produce high cardiac outputs per unit body mass than chimpanzees and gorillas. So those are important adaptations for vigorous physical activity. We also have key adaptations for respiration. So if you're going to get on all that high cardiac output, that's basically to pump oxygen around your body, right? And so you need to also breathe in a lot more oxygen. And humans have ability to expand our thoraxes more than most other animals, to enable us to have the really high tidal volumes, or the really high ventilatory volumes that enable us to suck in a lot of oxygen and then use it around our bodies. So, and that partly comes from the ability to have not just a big thorax, but also a very mobile thorax. So, if you look at this is basically breathing here on the x-axis against the medial lateral expansion of the thorax on the y-axis here in this lower graph, and this is the dorsoventral or front to back expansion of the thorax on the y-axis. We call this the bucket handle movement. We call this the pump handle movement. As you can see, dogs are capable of a little bit of a pump handle movement, like humans. Goats are not capable of it, but dogs are incapable because they're quadrupeds. Their limbs are constraining the medial lateral movement of the thorax, just like in goats. But humans have this amazing ability to also increase medial lateral movement, and the end result is that we have really high ability to breathe in a huge amount of oxygen. And those rib movements are made possible by joints between the ribs and the vertebra, which are much more concavo-convex in the genus Homo than they are in chimpanzees as well in Australopiths. So that ability to have all that movement evolved in the genus Homo. And that work, by the way, I should mention, was done by Eamon Callison in my lab. Really cool stuff. Okay, so why is all this going on? Well, the answer is to get meat, right? And so we think the importance for running is both for scavenging as well as persistence hunting. So for scavenging, like you see all those animals, you see a bunch of vultures in the distance, there's some meat there, and you want to get there before the hyenas. Well, you have an advantage in the middle of the day. You can get there before the hyenas do and have access to the meat before the hyenas have devour whatever the lions have left over. Another important behavior is what we call persistence hunting, which you can see from this video. So what happens is that hunters in the middle of the day will pick an animal, a big animal, and they'll chase it, they'll track it, they'll chase it, and they'll track it. It's a combination of walking and running. And eventually that animal, as you can see, this is a kudu, this is a San hunter, that kudu will collapse from heat stroke. And running is important for a wide range of other kinds of hunting behaviors, like chasing animals over cliffs, or chasing them into traps, or even in the snow. We have evidence of Native Americans who are hunting caribou, for example, and in the snow. And the snow apparently really tires those caribou out. And so if you have skis or some other ability to run on snow, you have the ability to do persistence hunting even in cold environments. And wherever we look in the ethnographic record, we find evidence for this kind of hunting. And it always involves running. And I also want to dispel the myth that running is just for men. When we look in the ethnographic record, wherever we look, if you start looking, you find evidence that women also do it too. So, for example, among the San, Nisa, for example, in her autobiography, as told to Marjorie Shostak, she describes actually several events in the book where she ran down animals or ran to scavenge. So and there's also evidence, for example, from the Agta hunter-gatherers in the Philippines, where men tend to use like lots of big weapons, but women often run down deer or pigs in among the Agta. And so it's true also in Australia and elsewhere. So let's not think that running is only for men. Women are just as good at running as men. And finally, an evolutionary approach helps us understand how and why we evolved to walk and run. But it's also important to remember that walking and running still matter, right? Because we live in a world in which we've now created all these machines that do all our work for us, and we now walk less. And one way of measuring that is looking at steps per day. So typical Americans take about 4,700 steps per day. That's based on really large samples of people from people's cell phones and stuff like that, or from pedometers. But for example, hunter-gatherers like the Hadza take about 16,000 steps a day. The Tarahumara we've measured take about 19,000 steps a day. So there's been an incredible decrease in just average daily number of steps per day. And that, of course, has negative effects. This is a very important graph. This is a data set from well over 1 million Americans that plots minutes per week of moderate to vigorous physical activity, so like walking or running, for example, against the age-adjusted relative risk of death. And you can see that just an hour a week of moderate to vigorous physical activity can lower your age-adjusted risk of death by about 40%. And if you get down to the World Health Organization recommended minimum, which is 150 minutes a week, you actually get a 50% reduction in your relative risk of death. And if you go all the way to the pre-industrial levels that we see, say, among the Hadza or the Tarahumara, you get down to almost a 70% reduction in your relative risk of death. So we are suffering really quite seriously from the fact that only about 20% of Americans actually meet that World Health Organization recommended minimum of 150 minutes a week. Another thing that's different, of course, is that we also walk and run weirdly. Like back in the day when we walked, we were either barefoot or we wore very minimal shoes, and now we wear all these fancy schmancy shoes that are comfortable or sexy or whatever, and they have all kinds of cushioning. Back in the day, people used to carry stuff when they walked. They'd carry water, they'd carry firewood, they'd carry food, they'd carry their babies, and now we carry almost nothing, maybe sometimes a little bit of a backpack, and that's about it. So walking has changed in all kinds of fundamental ways, and running has also changed, right? People used to run barefoot or in minimal shoes, but now the majority of people in Western countries like the United States running these very cushioned shoes, and of course that changes how we run our kinematics. So people who wear cushioned shoes are very often land really hard on their heels and they overstride, whereas people who are barefoot are forced to run what I call a barefoot style, which involves less overstriding and more of a flat foot when they land, more often a forefoot strike. People like who ran in the past, hunter-gatherers, they didn't run every day. They weren't training for marathons. They didn't run very fast. They tend to run like 10-minute miles, and they would run only occasionally. And they were doing huge distances every week. Whereas people like me who are training for marathons are running 5 or 6 days a week, and we're doing 50, 60 miles a week, and we're often doing it really fast. And whereas people used to run on trails, today of course a lot of us run on streets. And so all of that leads to much higher rates of injury. And so fundamentally, walking and running are the most fundamental physical activities that we evolved to do. And it's important to remember that it's a mismatch when we don't do them, right? Where our bodies are not well adapted for a lack of regular physical activity, and that most basically includes walking and running. And there are many, many examples. I already showed you the data for the sort of relative rate of curve, but since we're now confronting an epidemic of COVID, let me show you some data that just came out last week, which is from California, from Bob Salas, using the data from the Kaiser Permanente system. But they looked at everybody in the Kaiser system for which they've got data on physical activity, because it's actually a vital sign now in the Kaiser system. So they have a huge amount of data. They looked at over 48,000 adults and individuals in California who did not get that minimum 150 minutes a week that's recommended by the World Health Organization, compared to individuals who got 150 minutes or more. And this is after adjusting for age and sex and what they called race and obesity and smoking and heart disease and diabetes and etc. Individuals who were inactive had 2.5 times greater likelihood of dying from COVID, and they had a 1.7 times greater likelihood of ending up in the ICU. So, and there are a lot of reasons behind that, but most fundamentally it's because our bodies are adapted for physical activity, for walking and running, and we're poorly adapted for maintaining our health and getting old and staying healthy in their absence. Okay, so I'd like to thank a whole bunch of folks who've helped me with all been part of all this journey in terms of all the research that we've done on walking and running, and thank all the folks from CARTA, and I hope everybody keeps moving.
Hi, thank you very much for joining me today and for that really kind introduction. I'm very excited to tell you about some new data from my lab in which we've tried to uncover the genetic changes that led to humans becoming the sweatiest ape. So humans are distinct from our closest primate relatives in that the major mechanism that we use to cool ourselves off is to use the heat of our own bodies to vaporize water from the skin surface. Now, over the course of human evolution, our species has acquired a number of changes to the composition of the skin, which make this an efficient system for thermoregulation. So something that you're all probably familiar with is the fact that humans don't have fur. And we don't have fur because we have miniaturized virtually all of the hair on our body to peach fuzz. This allows for higher rates of airflow over the skin and therefore higher rates of evaporation. Now, in addition to the miniaturization of our body hair, a second very critical adaptation that enables thermoregulation by sweating in humans is that we have massively increased the density of eccrine sweat glands in our skin compared to other primates. Now, eccrine sweat glands are the very organs that that are responsible in response to a rise in body temperature or in skin temperature for driving water from the body onto the skin surface, which is what we actually vaporize to cool off. Now, if you compare the density of eccrine sweat glands in human skin to that of a chimpanzee or to a macaque, two closely related primates, in virtually any region of the body, what you'll find is that on average, humans have 10 times the density of eccrine sweat glands compared to our closest primate relatives. So a number of years ago, I became very interested in trying to understand what are the mutations and the genetic changes that evolved specifically on this human branch of the evolutionary tree that are responsible for giving our skin such a high density of eccrine sweat glands. So when we first started thinking about this question, we thought about, well, how does the skin decide how many sweat glands to build during development? Now, the reason we did this is that we know that most of evolution doesn't occur by reinventing the wheel. We know that much of species diversity is in fact generated by taking a highly conserved developmental paradigm or program and tweaking it to generate diversity. Now, it turns out that most of what we know about how the skin decides to build sweat glands and how many sweat glands to build comes from studies not done in humans, but rather done in mice. So in mice, actually as in most mammals outside of humans and our closest primate relatives, eccrine sweat glands are not used for thermoregulation, they're actually used for traction. And they're found not throughout the body, but they're found only on the bottom side of the paws, so the so-called volar skin. So what you're looking at here is the skin of a mouse paw, the bottom of the mouse paw. We've peeled the skin off and we've stained it. And these little squiggly things that you see are the ducts of individual eccrine sweat glands. Okay. Now, eccrine sweat glands develop from the outer layer of the skin during gestation, and that layer is called the ectoderm, and they specifically develop from these thickenings of the ectoderm called placodes. Now, again, we know from studies in the mouse that the expression of a protein called engrailed-1 or N1 is absolutely critical for getting these placodes to go down a path of development to become sweat glands. So this is a cross-section of mouse paw skin, the bottom of a mouse paw skin where the sweat glands are going to form. This is now during development. This is 2 days after the mouse is born, or P2.5, as compared to this, which is the skin of an adult mouse. What you're looking at here is this cross-section of the mouse paw skin, and everywhere that you see purple is basically cells where engrailed is being produced. Now, what we know from studies in the mouse is that the relative levels of engrailed expression at this stage of development are absolutely critical for determining how many sweat glands the mouse is going to go on and make. And we know, in fact, that the more engrailed that gets expressed in this deep layer of the ectoderm, the more sweat glands the mouse goes on to specify. In fact, this is one of the major intrinsic mechanisms, variation in engrailed-1 expression, which mice use to generate natural variation in eccrine gland density between different mouse strains. So with this knowledge in mind, we hypothesized that perhaps one way in which humans could have evolved a higher density of eccrine sweat glands in our skin is to acquire a mutation or mutations specifically on this human branch of the tree, which resulted in a higher production of engrailed 1 expression at that very important stage when sweat gland placodes are being specified, when the skin decides how many sweat glands it's going to build. Now, where are these mutations likely to lie? So one thing that we know is that the gene sequence for engrailed that actually encodes the engrailed protein is very highly conserved across primates. And in fact, we know that most evolutionarily relevant sequence changes are not likely to lie within a gene, but are likely to lie in regulatory DNA, the so-called enhancers that control where a gene is expressed, when a gene is expressed, and how much of a gene is expressed. So we had to look for mutations within enhancers of engrailed, specifically the enhancers that control how much engrailed gets expressed in the skin at that critical stage of placode specification. Now, it turned out that the first thing we actually needed to do was figure out what these enhancers are, because nobody knew at the time that we started this what the regulatory elements in DNA are that control the level of expression of this gene. Now, so we performed a screen in order to search for these enhancers. Now, our screen was based on a very simple observation, and that was that whether you are a mouse or a human, in regions of the skin where sweat glands are going to form, the pattern of engrailed expression is very similar. So this is a cross-section again through the bottom of the mouse paw, 2 days after the mouse is born when the placodes are being made. But this is exactly what the pattern of engrailed looks like during human gestation when the first sweat glands start to form. And so we reason, because of this similarity in engrailed expression patterns, that at least a subset of the enhancers that control engrailed expression should be ancient. They should be shared between mammals, okay? Because this pattern is shared between mice and humans. And so therefore they should be identical in sequence. We should be able to identify them purely based on sequence conservation. And so with this in mind, we used a computational method to look for non-coding regions, so not genes essentially, of the human genome near the engrailed locus itself, or the engrailed gene itself, which didn't encode proteins, but showed exceptionally high sequence conservation across placental mammals. And we did this across the genomes of 60 placental mammals. Through a somewhat long process that I won't go into of prioritizing, filtering our data set, we were able to identify in the end 23 priority engrailed 1 candidate enhancers, or ECEs, each of them about 1,000 base pairs long of DNA. Okay? Now, these are computationally identified. We have no idea whether or not these sequence elements actually have the ability to regulate gene expression. So we had to test this. And specifically, we needed to test it in a developmental context. The developmental context being where engrailed expression is relevant during sweat gland development, right? So are these enhancers able to function in the cells that express engrailed at this critical placode stage of development in the skin? Now, the way we did this was in mice. We, first of all, took each ECE of these 23 ECEs, and we built a little DNA construct which contained the ECE and then a gene that, if turned on, would produce GFP protein, green fluorescent protein. Okay, so if this element is able to act as an enhancer, then it'll turn on the expression of this green fluorescent protein, and will presumably do it in the cells where this element can function as an enhancer at the time when it can function as such. So we then package these little pieces of DNA into viruses, and we use these viruses to infect the skin, the outer layer of the mouse embryo, which gives rise to the skin during embryogenesis, essentially making virally mediated transgenic mice. And then we waited. And then 2 days after the mice were born, we looked, do we see GFP expressing cells within that engrailed 1 positive domain in the skin? Now, what I'm showing you here is what we were sort of trying to look for. Again, in that cross-section where engrailed is expressed in purple. And what we're looking for in our brown cells, because we detected our GFP using a colorimetric reaction, which makes the cells brown. We're looking for brown cells in that engrailed 1 positive domain. So using this screen, we were able to identify 5 engrailed 1 candidate enhancers located near the engrailed 1 gene itself. And for the rest of the talk, I'm going to focus on one particular element, which we called ECE18, which is located about 400 kilobases downstream of the gene that encodes engrailed 1 in both humans and mice. So positionally speaking, it's in the same place in humans as it is in mice relative to the engrailed gene. So these are samples of skin from mice in which we expressed either the mouse, the chimpanzee, or the human version of ECE18. And this is just the control, which is just the GFP alone without ECE18. And what you, I hope, can appreciate is in this deepest layer of the ectoderm, which is again the cells that express engrailed, all versions of ECE18 were able to give us brown cells. So the ECE18 versions are all able to activate gene expression in the cells that we know also express engrailed. Now, this is a qualitative assay. It doesn't actually tell us anything other than where and when the enhancer can function. It doesn't tell us anything about the relative strength or potency of the enhancer. So to do that, we had to do a slightly different type of assay. But again, it's a reporter assay, similar to what we did in the mice. Now, in this case, we're moving to cells in a dish, and these are cultured human or mouse keratinocytes, which are skin cells. In this case, we cloned different versions of ECE18 from various species, across placental mammals, and we cloned it upstream not of GFP, but of a gene that would encode the luciferase enzyme. Now, once we infect our cells with these reporters, if the enhancer is able to function, what it does is it activates the expression of luciferase, and then we can collect basically cell extract and determine how much luciferase was produced downstream of each of the ECE18 versions. And we can do this in a quantitative way using a luminometer. So what I'm showing you data is from human cultured keratinocytes as well as mouse cultured keratinocytes. The first thing, and again, what we're expecting is the stronger the ECE18 enhancer, the higher the luciferase activity we're going to detect, the more enzyme got made, essentially. So what I hope you can first appreciate is that the ECE18 doesn't really appear to be a very strong enhancer outside of simians. The second thing that should be jumping out at you is that the human version of ECE18, whether you're working with human skin cells or whether you're working with mouse skin cells, so independent of species context, the human version of ECE18 is always driving the most expression of luciferase. It's acting as the strongest enhancer in both contexts. But where is the activity coming from? So the original human ECE18 element that we cloned is quite long. It's about 1,000 base pairs, DNA base pairs long. So to figure out where really the activity was coming from, we basically cut this big piece into 2 smaller overlapping fragments, which we called A and B. And we retested them for their relative activity in the same type of luciferase assays. And I'm showing you the results here. So here's chimp ECE18 as a reference. You see it's about almost 3-fold lower in activity than the human element. And what we were able to find is that this fragment A can completely account for the quantitative activity of the full-length element all on its own. So it's about 600 nucleotides long rather than 1,000, and that really provides all of the activity of the enhancer. But what within this region is actually important? Now, there are 10 human-derived base pair substitutions within this fragment. So what are derived nucleotide substitutions are essentially positions, DNA base pairs, which are identical between chimps and gorillas, but they're different in human in terms of sequence, okay? So essentially humans are different than the ancestral state in great apes. So it turns out that if we mutate each one of these positions in human ECE18 back to the ancestral ape base, it makes little to no difference to the activity of the enhancer. It doesn't change it, and I'm not showing you that data here. In order to bring the activity of the human enhancer down to the level of chimpanzee or gorilla, because we got the same exact result with the gorilla, what you have to do is mutate all 10 of these positions in the human enhancer back to the ancestral ape sequence. So this tells us 2 very important things. It tells us, first of all, that it really is this fragment A, the 600 nucleotides, that is the core enhancer that's really provides all of the activity. But it also means that it is human-specific DNA mutations, substitutions, that are required for the gains in the activity that we see in the human enhancer. And it also tells us that it's really the cumulative effects of multiple mutations, all within this single regulatory element, that are critical for giving us that boost of activity in the human version of the enhancer. Now, all of this basically tells you that human ECE18 can function as an enhancer, and it doesn't tell you that it's actually an enhancer of engrailed. So how do we address that? So the first way we try to address this is in the only human context that's available to us experimentally, and that is cultured human keratinocytes, or skin cells in a dish. Now, in each of these cells, in the nuclei of each of these cells, in the DNA, you have the engrailed